It's the 28th to the day of December 2023. I'm going to be your host tonight, Dana Durnford. You can call in at 709-589-4406. All lines are open. We got a big show tonight. We're going to cover March of 2023 recap. It's not going to be as crazy as last night. I apologize for that. And that's how it goes sometimes. Not going to be easy, but it's not going to be as crazy. It's not going to be 4 hours and 20 minutes. Let's put it that way. We got through it. And the world is a better place. We're going to get through this. And let's get after it. Hi, everybody. Welcome, everybody. We got a poll for everybody tonight. Was more than 2.2 grams of isotopes released at Fukushima's 4 nuclear reactor meltdowns and 8 fuel pool meltdowns? That's right. Each of these reactors is worse than all nuclear meltdowns combined worldwide per reactor. And you have 4 of them. And at the top of the buildings were double fuel pools. Fuel pools could have between 5 to 6 reactor cores because they don't have a repository in Japan or anywhere else worldwide. These fuel pools were stuffed with reactor cores. This was a worst case scenario. And he built it in an earthquake zone where they have 1,000 earthquakes a year and a 3,000-year legacy of massive tsunamis. And they put the reactor cores above the reactors. It's hard to believe that was an accident. Alrighty, let's get after it. So we got a lot of headlines to cover about nuclear and Fukushima in particular. Remember, the media is pretending they're in a building that don't exist. Pretending they're in the fuel pools of Reactor 4, which are at the top of the buildings. Your media worldwide has spent 80 years manipulating you to the point where it's amazing you can even tie your own shoes. They have lied to you so much. Reactor 3, for instance, and Reactor 4's is very obvious to, I hope, to everybody. When you look at it, the buildings are completely gone. They were originally 190 feet and 65-meter buildings. Your media actually pretended that they were up at the very top of the buildings, despite the fact the buildings don't exist. So realize that even today they've refused to acknowledge this has happened. And in particular, every nuclear scientist worldwide knew the fuel pools and the reactor cores were gone. The media cut your throat every step of the way. I'm here to try to bring some balance back. We're going to get after it. International Energy Week, getting a feel for fusion. Well, you can't get a feel for something that doesn't exist, because it doesn't exist. France calls for Europe to throw its weight behind nuclear power. France tells Europe what to do. Yeah, you got to do it, man. The nuclear is falling apart. So they can put all the weight they want behind it, but that doesn't mean it's going to work. That's a couple of reactors in France, and that's the other side, where it's surrounded by farms. Do you know why it's surrounded by farms? The reason is pretty nefarious. It's meant to poison you in your supermarkets and your children who are extremely vulnerable, and the elderly that put you on the planet in the first place. They're targeting them in particular and everybody else in between. Why, oh why, is the world sitting silence while this genocide and omnicide machine is snuffing you out? France among the EU countries uniting to boost nuclear power, but they don't have the supply network, they don't have the manpower. It's 100% posturing. I'm sure some of them have good intentions, but it's posturing. Home of the last meltdown. Fukushima, 12 years after one of the worst nuclear disasters. This is the typical narrative from the media. This is the worst disaster. We've never had 4 reactors melt down, and we've never had fuel pools melt down. A fuel pool is typically worse than all nuclear reactors on a site melting down at the same time. There's more fuel in the pool. And it's just as volatile. Moltex, which is a British company that's set up here in Canada on the East Coast, nuclear ransom notes should be rejected. And what they want to do is they want to take the Canadian used reactor fuel, which is still lethal, and make mixed oxide fuel out of it and create these small modular reactors. But they don't have any applications in. They want the Canadian government to pay for all of their attempts. We know for a fact that this doesn't work. There's nobody on the planet with a successful application, let alone a reactor. And the reactors they're talking about are going to be mixed oxide fuel. This is simply the stupidest thing imaginable. And it just shows you the contempt of 80 years of never being held accountable. 80 years of being as evil as they like has come to this fruition where they just want to poison you and your communities on a different scale than they've been doing for 80 years. Ontario sites shortlisted for nuclear waste storage. They've had the money for 18 years, and they're at least 18 years away. Even if they built it today, it would take them 18 years to get it up and running. A hole in the ground. They don't want to put it anywhere. They want it to continue to split the atoms into the environment and exterminate the species. This is obviously what they've been up to the entire existence. CZ identifies 2 future preferred small modular reactor sites. Again, this is World Nuclear News. Definitely not somebody you want to be trusting. And their sites always look like something stupid that ultimately will have nothing to do with a reactor if you do build it. And this is meant to lull you into complacency. Look at the farmland in the background. You think that's an accident? How about if the fact that almost every nuclear power plant on the planet is surrounded by farms? Do you think that's an accident? Joint statement on international collaboration on cleaning up nuclear legacy sites. Joint statement. Another yawn fest. They got no excuses. The nuclear students don't work at these cleanup sites. The nuclear academics don't work at these cleanup sites. Nuclear scientists don't work at these cleanup sites. It's immigrants and the homeless and the destitute and the victims that don't speak the language. We need to send a couple of thousand of these nuclear scientists in there so they stop destroying our planet. Western U.S. cities vote to move ahead with novel nuclear power plant. Novel. Well, the cities didn't vote for it. A couple of mouthpieces from the nuclear industry did. VIH starting action against Croatian nuclear waste disposal near the border. I can't remember the story on that one. Croatia wants to build a nuclear waste disposal near their border countries. Uphill, obviously, so everything runs downhill into that country. Canadian Nuclear Laboratory, which is Chalk River, which is disgusting. It's the first nuclear meltdown that we know about in history. And all he done was grouted it into place. It's still hemorrhaging into the environment. And that happens to be one of the biggest freshwater aquifers on the planet. Gearing up for bidding on new management contracts. Yeah, these are contractors. This is not, the government owns it, but they just rent it out to whichever degenerate is the worst. If they're really, really evil, then they'll get the bid, no matter how ludicrous it is. United Kingdom Rolls-Royce small nuclear program to run out of cash by 2024. First off, the Rolls-Royce small nuclear program is not small. They're at least half the size of a conventional reactor. They're the furthest thing from a small. They're using the word small in order to get their hands on incentives. And that's the cash that they're going to run out of because they won't put a nickel of their own pennies into it. It's a 100% scam every time you look at this industry. Report by UN Nuclear Watchdog Seen by AP, says inspectors in Iran found uranium particles enriched to 83%. 83%. 83%, eh? Military grade is 15%. Let's put it that way. And they exaggerate constantly about Iran. They got 49 military bases, the Americans and the British, on the borders of Iran. 49 military bases. They surround Iran, and they're carrying out electronic and digital warfare against the country for a hobby. Canada's Cold War fallout shelters would have excluded most of us. Well, not most of us, all of us. Except for their inbreeds themselves, nobody else was getting in. They were taking your money that you needed to fix the country up and spending it on lavish things. And yet you sleep away. Yeah. Energy saving tokamak heat barrier solves Achilles heel in nuclear fusion. Again, this is nonsense to suggest that they resolved the Achilles heel of fusion. There's a real possibility it'll never actually get it. Because you're talking about 175,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And so that's going to boil an enormous amount of water. But they said, don't worry, if it shuts down, it can't have an accident. Well, think again. It's 175 million degree Fahrenheit temperatures. At those temperatures, if it can boil enough water to power millions of homes, it can go boom on a scale you've never seen before. Don't believe anything the nuclear industry tells you. Not a single thing. The truth is, the reality is, these are people who are perpetual liars. There's no lie they won't tell you to get their own way. There's zero lies they won't tell you. Nuclear Regulatory Commission approves license termination and site release for La Crosse boiling water reactor decommissioning project. So you got to get permission from the Nuclear Regulatory Agency before you can shut down the nuclear plant. And by the way, the Nuclear Regulatory Agency is the only people with the authority to make it illegal to poison you with radiation. The Congress can't do it. Parliaments can't do it. Governments can't do it. Only the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, that's appointed by the Prime Minister or the President of the country for that particular administration, has the ability to make it illegal. Why is that, I wonder? 3,000 other chemicals, they got no problem making it illegal to poison you, but not nuclear. If they made it illegal to poison you, you'd have to shut off all nuclear plants. You would have to jail everybody in the nuclear industry. After the license is returned to Dairyland, the project will officially be complete, and Dairyland will assume responsibility for the spent nuclear fuel that remains on site. So why is a corporation allowed to be in charge of something that can destroy your country? These are not decommission authorities. They're just a corporation. And the people they're hiring are not academics and experts. They're the lowest wages jobs you can get. You're setting yourself up for the worst of the worst to happen. And the nuclear, by having nuclear, you can't protect the 8 million species. More Canadians support small modular reactors. This is nuclear engineering. First off, that's simply not true. You can't speak for Canadians by putting out a headline, and then I can put out a headline, more Canadians wants to hang everybody in the nuclear industry. That doesn't mean it's true. And it's dishonest to suggest that the country is unified with nuclear. Nuclear power crossing the divide. This is Australia. And look at this disgusting parasite. Puts a child playing as a painting on a nuclear cooling tower. Rossing uranium mine gets 10-year life extension. Of course it does. It destroys everything downstream. Kremlin calls 3 NATO nuclear powers de facto war with Russia. Well, there's 29 NATO countries, right? If you look up NATO, it's 29. It says in the Wikipedia and on their site, NATO is 29 militaries. Not 29 countries, but 29 militaries with no effective control over it, and they have nuclear weapons, and they're willing to use them. And so right now they're fighting a proxy war with Ukraine because NATO is supplying the weapons to Ukraine, rather. The 29 countries, the 29 militaries, I should say. How lifetime emissions of different energy sources stack up. Well, nuclear is the most resource-intensive industry in history. It needs 2 gas, oil, and coal plants just to keep it ticking along. Medium life cycle greenhouse gas emissions of renewables versus non-renewable. Well, geothermal greenhouses, like they just done up in Alberta, for instance. I can't remember what it is. They can produce all kinds of product each day, and at a rate that just blows my mind. What is it? 29,000 cucumbers a day they can produce, for instance. 50,000 strawberries a day. Every day. This is geothermal we're talking about. Why are we looking at any energy besides geothermal? It's very confusing. How do you think we're going to have a future if you don't start looking at the solution once in a while? Doomsday Seed Vault set to get its most diverse donation amid an urgency to boost the reserves. The urgency, well, that's their reserves. Not you won't be around to enjoy it. Crossbenchers call for more detail on climate policy. More detail. Well, climate change is caused by 80 years of nuclear emissions. 1.1 million gallons of radioactive water possibly to be dumped into Cape Cod. Every day, each of fuel pools, there's multiple fuel pools per reactor and multiple reactors on a site. So for their 60-year lifespan or 50-year lifespan, whatever it is, each fuel pool was emitting 120,000 liters a day through evaporation. And so they got the fuel out of the water. Now the water left over, in order to make a profit, it's cheaper just to dump it in the ocean, for instance. Because that's what they've been doing for 60 years. And we see multiple reactor sites where somehow or another that becomes an issue. They've been doing it for 60 years at the same site every day. And all I'm trying to say is they get the population completely manipulated. And so here's the population fighting for years not to do it, and in no point during those years of trying to stop the 1.1 million gallons have they realized that this has been going on for 60 years nonstop. And I agree, don't dump it in your water. Why would you do that? But that's what they've been doing for 60 years, and so they kept their mouth shut for 60 years. And they got one final dump to go, and now they got big protests, and everybody's coming together, and they get their whole life thrown into this to try to stop it. And if they succeed, then they'll go right back to sleep. New fallout, 76 Atomic Shop weekly update. 76 Atomic Shop. I got no idea what that story was about. I forget now. The infamous taser bomb ignited what is still the most powerful man-made explosion ever seen, with 3,300 times more energy than the Hiroshima bomb. Actually, no. Hiroshima was a uranium bomb. This was a plutonium bomb. It's actually equal to 3,800 Hiroshima bombs. It's 50 megatons, right? Which is 3,800 Nagasaki bombs, because that was a plutonium bomb. So imagine 3,800 Nagasaki bombs going off. Is that a nuclear war? Does that meet the definitions of anybody in nuclear war? Because that's a nuclear war, even though it wasn't done in so-called anger. It's still a nuclear war. Hi, everybody. Hi, Stephen. Richard. Fast Thinker, Don Vincent. Everybody's pretty burnt out for last night's show. I don't feel bad when people can't keep up because I can't keep up. I don't know how anybody else could keep up. Rockies lose out on clean energy again. Rockies. No, nuclear is not clean energy because that's what they're talking about. Colorado had a chance to achieve our state's ambitious climate goals by ensuing grid reliability and economic opportunities. Instead, due to false narratives, Democrats killed an important bill in the committee. They killed the nuclear bill. Thank goodness. He said nuclear is one of the safest, most reliable, carbon-free energy sources available today. God darn it. Again, this is 100% a disease factory. Everybody within 100 miles stands a good chance of getting sick with a permanent illness. Nuclear museum gets ready for science is everywhere, camps. Nuclear museum, a museum that has overnighters for your kids at the nuclear. Oh, I remember when we were growing up, we used to hang out at the nuclear museum. It was so much fun. My kids are going to be nuclear scientists when they grow up. Like, that's evil. It's evil. It's absolutely evil what that nuclear museum's been doing. Clear sign that quark and gluon plasma production turns off at low energy. Oh, it's Brookhaven National Laboratory, Department of Energy, who gave almost everybody within 50 miles cancer. Part of Fukushima Nami, which is a nuclear wasteland about 7 kilometers away from ongoing nuclear meltdowns, to exit evacuation orders on March the 31st. Yeah, but it was only for 3% of the town, I believe, was it? Part of the town affected by the nuclear disaster. 3% of the town. Which is quite a different story than what they're claiming, right? Part of Fukushima Nami to exit evacuation order. Well, that's for the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society and immigrants who don't speak the language. It's 3% of the town. So, like, if the rest of your town is off limit because it's a nuclear wasteland, I don't know if you're going to be very clever to work this out, but it's stupid. You're stupid if you go back to you're the definition of stupid. You're actually stupid. If they show you a map and says you can only go here, there, and there in a nuclear wasteland, and you actually go there, you're a moron. You're a moron. You're an idiot. And the people that let you do it are murderers. But if you can't, and a lot of people don't know the difference. Well, honey, 3% of the town is open up. Let's go, baby. We can have a picnic. Well, not in the garden because it's a nuclear wasteland. And if you lose the baseball across the street, you can't go retrieve it. And of course, you're counting on there can't be any wind because the wind's going to blow across the other 97% of the nuclear wasteland and into your face. Like, how can you be that stupid? How did people get that stupid to go into a nuclear wasteland? Like, really? You can't clean up 3% of a nuclear wasteland and then quantify it that is you can go back there and live. You can't do that. You can pretend all you want because that's all they're doing, but you can't physically do it. Radiation doesn't respect any borders or fences or signs. 12 years on, Fukushima aiming to lead drone use in disasters. Yeah, it's going to take them 10 years to build a robot that can fly and spread water. But they got a robot that's going to fly into a nuclear meltdown when no robot has ever been and hang out for days. Of course, this is not true either, but that's the official story. Japan's Fukushima wastewater had reached Taiwan in 2 years, 1.5 years. Nuclear is, it's hard to find anything as evil as nuclear. Does anybody know something as evil as nuclear? Anybody? I'll keep my eye on the comment section. Hang on. Let me open it up. Let me know if you can think of something as evil as nuclear. I want to share it with everybody. There's nothing as evil as nuclear. There's nothing comes close to stupid nuclear. So, Taiwan's over here. Over there in the nuclear plume. This plume model is only based on 31 days. So when the plume stops in a few seconds, that's basically 31 days. But that doesn't mean the plume stops. The model, the depiction that we're using stops. You really think Taiwan escaped that? You really think Taiwan didn't get anything? That's how screwed up the world is. Taiwan believes that it's going to show up there in about 1.5 years. They're protesting by the hundreds of thousands, and they're only protesting tritium instead of nuclear meltdowns. I almost want to give up on the world, right? Additionally, the council has put in place a laboratory for tritium. Yeah, but the reactor's melted down. Yeah, but nothing got out, Dana, only tritium, obviously. Like only tritium can survive, right? A misunderstood energy resource. Let's go nuclear. Let's go. Let's go nuclear. Let's go. Let's go nuclear. Let's go. Let's go nuclear. Nuclear is crazy. If you don't get rid of nuclear, nuclear is going to get rid of you. Like, you think I'm kidding? You're wrong. U.S. and U.K. energy, the only way nuclear can exist if everything else dies. U.S. and U.K. energy dialogue focuses on breaking Russia's grip. That's Janet, the maniac, you see right there. How nuclear power plants became tools of war. You can't have a nuclear weapon without a nuclear power plant. In fact, a nuclear power plant is all about the nuclear cycle. Nuclear cycle is about an 18-month cycle, where the fuel rods now will produce plutonium on a prolific amount on their own, aka splitting atoms. And so when you take it out and put it in the fuel pool, that's what it's doing for the next couple of 100,000 years. And those isotopes are going to go where? Oh, that's right, into your environment because there's no containment. And after 80 years of this, and some of it's used for weapons, but a lot of it just ends up in the food because the places are surrounded by farms. Almost every nuclear plant is surrounded by farms. M81 robotic dog armed with a grenade launcher. Why though? Because, like, if you can dream it up, they can go ahead and do it, but why though? What? Like, really, what the frig is wrong with these people? They can't do anything. All they know how to do is blow stuff up. And so guess what they're going to do? Paper City, the untold story of the firebombing of Tokyo. Yeah, they firebombed Tokyo. They burnt Tokyo down just before Nagasaki and Hiroshima. They didn't use the nuclear weapons. They could have burnt down Nagasaki and Hiroshima the same way. And there's so many useful idiots. Like, why are nuclear power plants surrounded by farms? And I love how nuclear will roll out a pretty girl, because they don't know any better, the ones they do roll out. Because they don't have a spokesperson. Like, most industries have tons of spokespeople. Nuclear doesn't have an actual spokesperson. Can anybody name a single person in the nuclear industry? They're pretty good people, Dana, a man or girl. Well, you can't. And another thing you can't is you can't survive in a nuclear wasteland with a paper suit on. These are not going to be scientists. These are not academics. These are not journalists, even though they got it written on their shirts. These are paper suits. You need a suit 6 feet thick to protect you, for goodness sakes. Residents of nuclear crisis hit NAMI to sue TEPCO and the government after settlement talks failed. Well, they wanted to give them $12,000 for losing their home, their jobs, their communities, all their possessions. They can't go to the graveyards no more. Their hundreds and hundreds of year old ancestral lands can't be habitable anymore. And they probably still charge them taxes. The community probably still charge them the taxes, for goodness sakes. What remains of an irradiated, damaged, and abandoned Japanese town? So they want to get, if you own that business, they want to give you $12,000 for all the trouble they caused you for the last $1,000 a year, basically. That's pretty nice of them, isn't it? God bless TEPCO. They love you so much. All the people, these homes, people live there, they want to give them $12,000 and then shut up. If you own that gas station, this is what they want to give you for the inconvenience of losing your livelihood. $12,000. If you own that building, you're entitled to get $12,000. And anybody you see standing up in these pictures, these are well-disciplined homeless people. If you own the buildings there and the houses, you're entitled to $12,000. Because nuclear takes care of their own, not you. If you own that and you're entitled to $12,000, it's absurd. If you own that workman shop, yes, that's right, you're entitled to $12,000. And look, they still got shirts for sale hanging outside. They got full stocks. The whole story is crazy. If you own just, you're entitled to $12,000. Don't worry though, the vending machines with the used kids' panties are still working. You count on Japan to make some things that don't break anyway. So this is how, of course nothing got out. They abandoned this because they were bored. There's nothing got out, only 2.2 grams, right? We know that because that's our poll tonight. Hello everybody, welcome back to the madness. Was more than 2.2 grams of isotopes released at Fukushima's 4 nuclear reactors and 8 fuel pools? Well, maybe it wasn't, Dana, because, you know, maybe it was only 2.2 grams and people just, they said, well, I'm going to give up my house because TEPCO is going to pay me $12,000 in 12 years. That's a pretty good deal, Dana. Blah, 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 blah. I apologize. Meant to turn the volume down. Blah, 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 blah. And you can never go back to it. You can never decommission it, or they would have, see? But don't worry, there's one of these administrations will get it in their head, hey, let's decommission it and make them go back. That's what they're doing in all the other communities. Japan betrayed the citizens over radiation. Betrayed, I don't think, is quite the right word. Japan murdered you. Accused of betraying its own people. They don't have it. Its own people is the nuclear industry. They didn't send the nuclear industry in there, so they didn't betray them, did they? But they gave the American the military the information about the spread of radiation from the 5,500 speedy models that were produced, paid for by the taxpayers. But they didn't tell the taxpayers to get out of the way, because that would make the nuclear look bad, Dana. You couldn't tell them. Better to sacrifice a few $100 million than damage the reputation of the great nuclear power, Dana. Goodness gracious. Because we had no information, we were unwittingly evacuating to an area with higher radiation. No, you'd think that wasn't on purpose. Come on, man. Come on. Japan delayed release of radiation details. What? Oh my God. They refused to tell people the numbers, is more like it. They didn't delay it. They still haven't told them. A report finds mistakes in Fukushima response. little nuke tarts, they crack me up sometimes. Nuclear reactors closed due to leaking water. That was 8 of December 2011. Well, let's have a look at it, see how bad it is. They had some leaking water, did they? I don't see any leaks. I don't know what the frick they're talking about. Fire that sucker up. The operator of a nuclear power plant in western Japan has shut down one of its reactors because of leaking radioactive. Leaking. Ha. Do you think something can leak there, or do you think it'll just flow right out? Oh, that was another nuclear power plant. I apologize. Poor skeptical me. It leaking. There's another plant they had to shut down. Contained about 1 million times as much strontium as the maximum safe level. Per spoonful? Cubic centimeter? Per liter? Strontium is easily absorbed by living tissues and causes some cancers. And, 1,800 other diseases. TEPCO says some of the 45 tons or more of the contaminated water may have reached the Pacific Ocean. Well, how are you going to stop it? How are you going to stop water from a nuclear meltdown getting into the ocean? Shows the technology, TEPCO, which was nationalized, became the Japanese government immediately. Fukushima fuel rods eating through solid concrete. That's December again. Some of these headlines are in there because we covered them in March. That's Reactor 3. I don't know if there's any cement eating through the reactor because the reactor's up there somewhere. Oh, no, wait, it's over there. It took 27 days for it to end up all over the bloody planet. They show you the very top frame, not very good at that, of Reactor 1, which was the fuel pool detonated. But all the reactors had detonated by March the 16th. Some of them multiple times. The rear axis inside of Fukushima. Inside Fukushima. These are degenerate media from ABC. These are unbelievable degenerate medias. We got to do it. There's not much I can do about it. Let's get you through the pictures the best we can. So yeah, they swam through all of this and stopped the reactors from melting down, Dana. The waves came ashore at 435 miles per hour. And then there was multiple waves on top of each other, and then it ended up far into the cities, which is what you're seeing now. But the original onslaughts, there was multiple tectonic plate movements over a 200-kilometer area or something. And so they created multiple tsunamis. There she is in the far distance, Fukushima. And so ABC, like when the media, you're not going there. Even though that's what they're implying, that they're going there. And look at these creatures. He's trying to murder you. Well, he's not trying to. He's successfully murdering you. He's disarming you, and you're not able to make informed decisions because of that monster. This is a Reactor 2. They put that there so they can put a crane in there that will reach inside. But the whole problem with the story was it's all about. It's not about trying to. You can't decommission it by putting that containment there. You can't go in there. That's death sentence immediately. They build these things off sites and then they assemble it with cranes. He's a despicable scumbag, this guy. You got your paper suit on? Yeah. All right, let's roll, baby. Paper suit can't protect you. These are typically the homeless and the destitute and the victims of society. That's a mixed oxide fuel facility. That's MOX fuel facility. So the building to your left is right alongside of the mixed oxide fuel facility, for goodness sakes. And they put that structure over the wreckage. There's nothing actually physically left of Reactor 3. I'll give you a picture of what it actually looks like underneath that contraption that they so your building to your left is underneath the contraption to your right. And that was put there. It doesn't physically touch reactor 3 because it's obviously it's very fragile. But the idea was to manipulate you into thinking that they're gone in the fuel pool. This is the top of reactor 1. This is original footage actually. And the fuel pool caught fire and detonated. I showed you the explosion, I think, at the beginning. And this person's there trying to pretend that everything is hunky-dory. He's most likely not even there. It's most likely green screen. Because there's no way he's stupid enough to be stood there with no respiratory systems to mitigate the radiation. Because you can't, your filtration systems can't stop the radiation 100% or even close to it. A paper suit is not protection. You can't be protected from gamma shines, X-rays, neutron bombardments, and beta rays, and everything else. And see, the background doesn't match up. The background in these pictures and videos don't actually match up. And if you know anything about cameras and lenses, you know how prolific that they would have used a manual lens, right? Not a motor-driven lens. Obviously, these were manual lenses that they were using. And so even if you focus in on the front with those manual, you can get the depth of the back too. And so when you see the really blurred back, that's typically propaganda machine at full speed. I really disrespect these people. These masks can't protect you, by the way. Like, so you can put 200 million atoms, anthropogenic man-made atoms on the head of a needle, but you can't see it. So how are you going to separate, say, 10,000 this or 10,000 of that or 10,000 of these? They're all exact same size. And you've got to contain everything. You can't just separate it. So therefore the filters can't possibly work, right? And they're going to go in, this is the alleged water filtration system, also known as the ALPS. In 2014, this still wasn't working in April. In August of 2014, the RIVA system, which was French's system equivalent to this, still didn't work. It was unused, period. This thing, they turned it on apparently, and then they had to run away from it. You can't, like, once you turn it on, you can't change the filters. The whole idea is to manipulate you into thinking. The idea is to manipulate you so that you don't say, wait a second, it's all gone. That's what they're up to. And because the implications is that they killed right away the Pacific Ocean. And so there is not a lot of trouble to escape nuclear having this being the fall guy for the death of the oceans and the planet. So they built these contraptions and the tanks strictly to manipulate you. If you fill the tanks up with the emissions we're talking about, which is 2.2 sieverts a liter of beta radiation, you can't have beta without alphas and neutrons and gamma. And so per liter, just if it was only beta, which it couldn't possibly be, if you put that into the tank, that's about 1.4 million sieverts. And 3 sieverts is a lethal dose, which means you can't build another tank. But the problem with it also is you're pouring water over fuel, allegedly, then you're sucking that up and putting it in the tanks. Which means you're going to have the whole enchilada at the bottom of the tank, which will cause a criticality, and you'll burn a hole through the tank. Then you have to evacuate the site. You can't put it in the tanks. The idea of the tanks was to trick you into not looking at that and not being able to comprehend that it's already gone. And yes, where did it go? It's gone all around your entire planet. And because, like, Chernobyl was 600 miles away from the ocean, from the Black Sea. Fukushima is right on the ocean. And I really disrespect these people for suggesting that during the nuclear meltdown. But that's what they get paid to do, and they get paid very handsomely. Or they might even volunteer it. They might even do it for free. Jake the Snake Strummer reports. He's a despicable creature, you know? Fukushima plant reaches cold shutdown. The 16th of December 2011. So 16th of December 2011, the buildings without reactors or fuel pools anymore reached cold shutdown, did it? And they show you the world's stupidest picture. The stable cooling of the reactors and the used fuel pool. But the fuel pools are at the top of the buildings. The top of the buildings don't exist, so how are you going to cool that down? They're disgusting, is the only way, because these are planet killers. These are planet killers. Water used in the cooling process subsequently became a major headache, which had to release tons of the contaminated liquid into the Pacific. You can't contain it. The buildings are actually destroyed. You can't go in and retrieve water from this. There's not much left to spray water around, but there is fuel there, so you are forced to spray water on those reactors. And Reactor 1 and Reactor 2 sites. The reactors are not in the buildings, neither are the fuel pools in any of the 4 buildings. In fact, those stacks, the base of them is around 25 sieverts or higher, which means you can't get near the base of that. And so if you can't get near the base of it, how can you get near the reactors? If you can't get near the base of the stacks, how are you going to get near the reactors? 3 sieverts is a lethal dose, typically, but in this environment, there's no way to survive it. There's thousands and thousands of homeless missing. Radioactive Xenon, which is the British scumbag degenerate terminology, found in milk powder. 31 becquerels per kilogram found in baby formula, and it's below the limit of 200 becquerels per kilogram. There are concerns that babies are more susceptible to the harmful effects of radiation. Well, they've done millions and millions and millions of studies on this stuff. There's no guessing here whatsoever, right? And 11 becquerels a kilogram, children get permanent damage to their hearts. Now, when you're talking about babies, like a study came out in 2019 that 14.2% of 100,000 newborns, neonates and infants, needed open heart surgery. A Japanese nuclear worker tells the ABC he was deliberately ordered inside wearing insufficient protective gear, aka a paper suit, to tackle the Fukushima nuclear meltdowns. He was ordered in. You just tell them to get lost. You don't have to go in. Fukushima workers told to ignore radiation alerts. They were told to connect the cable and not to worry about the radiation, because I worked at the Fukushima plant that was told to help lay cables to get power back onto the Reactor 3 turbine building. First off, the Reactor 3 turbine building was a nuclear wasteland. You can see parts of it up there. But that's Reactor 3, so what's the sense of having power to a turbine building even if you could, when rather Reactor 3 didn't even exist? Right, it's meant to make you think that it didn't melt down, right? That's all it was about. Suggesting they got 180 millisieverts of radiation. The bottom of the stacks are 25 sieverts, for goodness sakes, we know now. Lying comes natural, murder is secondary. It's just part of the process. Killing you and destroying your future and the 8 million species, that's just business when it comes to nuclear industry. Forcing about 160,000 people to flee to homes. It was actually 500,000 people. Residents paying back Fukushima compensation. They destroy your home. You can't even go back to visit your loved ones in the graveyards. You can't go back and get your pets. And the money they give you, you got to give it back to them. That's nuclear. That's 100% nuclear, right? Gangsters accused of cashing in on Fukushima. They're paying the homeless the equivalent of $11 US a day. $11. Nuclear scientists are not going to go there, Dana. Nuclear students are not going to go there. They're too busy telling your children that it's like a banana and a potato chip. Fukushima workers told a lie about radiation exposures. Of course they were. Nuclear operated released secret Fukushima tapes. Yeah, 60 and older should be prepared to die at the nuclear plant. Ex-Prime Minister reveals meltdowns almost crippled Japan. Oh, they said if Reactor 3 or Reactor 4 had of fuel pools had went, they would have abandoned Tokyo. So they said if that happened, they would have had to abandon Tokyo. Guess what happened? Guess what they didn't do? TEPCO directors quit with golden parachutes. Millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars. And then they took some of that and bought shares in TEPCO because they're dirt cheap. And then they artificially inflated the shares and cashed in again. A Japanese nuclear worker tells the ABC he was deliberately ordered into a radioactive building. If I was there and I seen an ABC reporter and I had a gun, I would make him go into the building. I wouldn't hesitate. I'll tell your family you loves them. Now get in the building. You piece of shit. Get in there and melt. Authorities comb Fukushima coast for bodies. Not the nuclear industry. And their paper suits. That's not going to protect them, unfortunately. Japan cancer risk rises. What's the date on that one? February 2013. Huh. Uh, 865,000 extra cancers in 2012. 865,000 extra cancers the year before. Two former Japanese prime ministers take anti-nuclear stance to stage at a rock festival. They didn't take it far enough, did they? Canadian officials, there was 5 of them came out a couple of years ago, right, and denounced nuclear. And all the media just ripped them to pieces. They threw them to the dogs, to the hounds. Canadian officials accidentally pushed nuclear alert to millions, warning of an incident at an Ontario plant. Was that the Pickering and the Darlington or the Bruce Power? I can't remember, here in Canada. So it was like it was a Sunday morning, and he sent out around, I can't remember, several million emergency text messages that the plant was melting down. So everybody woke up 7 a.m. on Sunday morning, and then they retracted it. They retracted the story and said there was no meltdowns. To the people of Ontario, an emergency bulletin which applied to people within 10 kilometers. Why would you like the Americans? At least they do 10 miles at a Pickering disease factory. There's no abnormal releases of radioactivity. People near the Pickering plant do not need to take any protective actions. Remain tuned to the local media. If you trust the local media, you're a moron. That was the warning committed to everybody's cell phone. Everybody was panicking. But that's like, in order for them to send out the message, it has to go through a whole different bunch of channels before that message can go out. So something happened. And they've had major releases there before, folks, right? And they acknowledge it years later, of course. No, there's no checks and balances whatsoever. The International Atomic Energy Agency is no regulatory agency, folks. 6 years after Fukushima nuclear disaster, residents trickled back to the deserted towns. Trickle back? No, the morons trickled back. The residents didn't. Displaced Fukushima Sake brewery to restart in the hometown where you can't live even today, using only local rice from the nuclear meltdown zone. Does that give you confidence that idiots are running the planet or what? Some Fukushima municipalities lack nuclear evacuation plans as no entry orders are lifted. They didn't even clean up some places and they just open it up. You can move, bring the kids, grab grandma, grandpa, come on back. Now, nuclear is despicable. It's your number one enemy, whether you know it or not. Airborne radiation near Fukushima nuclear plant, which doesn't exist anymore, by the way, it's a multiple nuclear meltdowns, still far higher than government's max. That was 2018. So how's a paper suit going to protect you in that environment? Oh, that's right, it can't. Barge to begin cleaning hundreds of tons of debris off the Alaska coastline from Japan's tsunami. Japan's tsunami covered British Columbia and Alaska's coastlines. And they sent out hundreds and hundreds of people to pick it up with no paper suits. There are more than, that's a joke by the way, because a paper suit can't protect you. There are more than 1,500 such assemblies in the pool. I can't believe these people, how heartless and stuff. They're talking about Fukushima, right, in that story. I can't believe how unbelievably hateful they are to humanity and the 8 million species. And so they were talking about Reactor 4 where decommissioning slip-up could trigger a monumental chain reaction. They said that if the assemblies in the fuel pool touches each other, they would look like this. Thank God that didn't happen, right? Oh, wait, now that did happen. Silly me. Well, the only thing I'm thankful is that I'm not there with a paper suit on. Radiation levels in the harbor off Fukushima hit 2-year high. And it was pretty high the 2 years before that. And the reason is that, like, say, strontium-90, for instance, is just one of the many isotopes with this particular attribute, peaks after about 1,000 days or something, 3 years, which is about 100-to-1 ratio of cesium-137. And it stays that way for tens of thousands of days. Fukushima operator TEPCO ignored advice 2 years ago to control the ground contamination. You can't control it with homeless and the destitute, the victims of society. Immigrants don't speak the language of paper suits, for goodness sakes. U.S. nuclear expert Lake Barrett, not concerned by Fukushima leaks, not concerned by multiple nuclear meltdowns and 8 missing fuel pools. Well, now, Lake, anybody knows Lake Barrett, or anybody who's been around a little bit at all, knows how much I disrespect piece of shit Lake Barrett. Disgusting parasite Lake Barrett. New radiation hotspots found at Fukushima nuclear plant. Fukushima plant spilling contaminated water into the sea for years. There you go. Now we're getting somewhere. The wage equates to $125 per shift or $10 an hour. Oh, actually, it's $11 a day is the actual numbers. That's what they're getting, not $125 a day. Groundwater radiation spikes at the crippled because they're using the homeless, right? They're just robbing them. Yeah, they're getting a lot more than that, but it's being stolen by their bosses and by the companies and by their bed and breakfast groups and the buses that brings them back and forth. They're charged for everything, and they basically end up at $11 a day if they're really, really lucky. But they're going to get sick and die, so they're not going to collect their checks very often anyway. Groundwater radiation spikes at the crippled Fukushima. Like, calling multiple nuclear meltdowns crippled is why we're in so much trouble in the first place. TEPCO said water samples collected from a well on Thursday contained 400,000 becquerels, atoms per liter of beta ray emitting substance. It can't be just beta ray. Per liter. These are the lethal doses by the liter, because when you add in alphas and neutrons and gammas and then the X-rays, you're talking about just a nightmare. The reading from the radioactive tritium also shot to a record high of 790,000 becquerels. Well, Well, the problem is that if you've got beta ray, heavy beta ray emitters there, you can't read the signal of tritium. You can't separate it either to read it. That's a total fable to suggest that they knew a number on tritium. So they're most likely talking about a gamma or an alpha of significance. Radioactive water is stored in around 1,000 tanks. That's 2013. Guess how many tanks they got today? Oh, that's right, Dana, 13. That's amazing. I'm sorry, 1,000. Groundwater radiation spikes that crippled Fukushima in 2013. Fukushima plant spilling contaminated water into the sea for years. It's not spilling, it's hemorrhaging. It's just flowing straight in. There's no way to contain it. Fukushima Rice passes radiation test for the first time since 2011 nuclear disaster, 2015. They have about, each year they got over 360,000 tons of rice. And none is tested above 100 becquerels per kilogram, limit set by the government. Before Fukushima was 0.1 becquerel per kilogram. Post-Fukushima was at 1,000. It was actually 500 becquerels per kilogram. And they're not checking, the farmers are checking. They gave the farmers inferior Geiger counters, gamma counters, and told them to check the rice before they sent it to market. And if it was over 500 becquerels, add rice that wasn't so as contaminated to dilute it down and then ship it away. They're not actually checking it, right? Revisiting Fukushima 5 years on. 10 million bags of nuclear waste. There's 30 million bags altogether that we know about. Some media says 60 million, right? The total affected area span of more than 1,100 square kilometers. You covered the entire planet with radioactive fallout, for goodness sakes. The entire planet was buried under perpetual radioactive fallout. They're still hemorrhaging at it today. The plumes take about 30 days to cover the entire planet, and it never stops. It never goes away. They've been doing it, by the way, from all sites for 80 years. They're all hemorrhaging radiation to the environment. Overgrown and irradiated. But the official story is of July the 13th this year is nothing got out. Despite all the evidence I'm showing you, like claiming that there's 8.4 microsieverts in the nuclear wasteland, somehow they call it a difficult to return zone, which is something I've never heard before. It's always been called a nuclear wasteland. Japan's the only pieces of shit that would call it a no-go zone. And Japan really is a piece of shit. 80% of the locals head in nuclear disaster areas say they can't meet population goals. 80% of the local heads, the local mayors, they can't meet population goals. Because they do got goals, trust me. The radiation limit for soil contaminated by Fukushima. Radiation limits for contaminated soil and reuse experiments lowered after the local opposition. So they were claiming that some of the bags were only 8,000 becquerels per kilogram, but the criteria for the bags was 100,000 becquerels per kilogram. So they say instead of reusing stuff at 8,000 becquerels because of the blowback, they said they weren't going to use stuff that's below 3,000 becquerels per kilogram, which is considered a dirty bomb everywhere else worldwide. Nuclear watchdog questioned Environment Ministry plan to reuse radioactive soil. You're talking about 30 million one-ton bags. 30 million. It's hard to comprehend how big it is, but basically a one-ton bag can fit into, only one of them can fit into a back of a one-ton pickup truck. So bumper to bumper, that's 5 rows of traffic, bumper to bumper, right around the entire planet. The Environment Ministry deleted some of its remarks from minutes on the contaminated soil meat. That was nice of them. And closed-door meetings on the reuse of contaminated soil, which doesn't make any sense. Because you get a different administration and they're like, well, we're going to reuse it. We're not going to store it. We don't got to do jack shit. Our administration will do whatever it wants. This is why you see this stuff happening. Reuse of radioactive soil feared to trigger illegal dumping. They've never stopped dumping. Like, there's endless reports of Tokyo dumping it in the harbors because Tokyo was highly contaminated. Ministry greenlights reuse of radioactive soil for public work projects. The soil may have to be monitored for up to 170 years. It's going to have to be monitored for 1 million years. It's actually got fuel particulates in it, for goodness sakes. If you get that in your body, you're done. You're dying within a year or two. Radioactive soil storage. But nothing got out. That's the official story, right? As of July the 13th this year, nothing actually got out. Anxiety soars as cesium builds up in Fukushima dams. Anxiety. Like, just acknowledging cesium is you're making a mistake. Like, pretending the other isotopes don't exist, that's a serious flaw in humanity that is going to cost us everything. Radioactive contaminants levels can't be read at 31 Fukushima temporary waste sites. That's okay. What is it they had originally? 150,000 of these sites? You know, we covered a headline last night about where they had over 500,000 sites where they test regularly for radiation. 500,000 sites. Try wrapping your mind around this statement. Where they test regularly for, they cleaned up and they test for radiation too. And what was it like? They said 12,000 sites never changed. They're only looking for gammas, remember? They're always having more earthquakes off the coastline. And of course, you're talking about fragile reactors. Reactors are very, very, what is left of them is very fragile. Well, it depends on how honest you are. If you're honest, then you say, well, it looks like this. If you're a scumbag, you say it looks like that. Because that's what they're both the official pictures. One of them's not true. I can't tell the difference. Local firms turns veggie waste into eco straws. Local firm. This is Minimasoma. You don't want to take anything. You don't want to be in Minimasoma, which in many places is 20 million becquerels per kilogram. Art Festival planned to boost reconstruction efforts in Fukushima. That was actually in Fudobar, where they had artists come out of Tokyo going into the nuclear wasteland to draw pictures to signify that it was a rebirth of a nuclear wasteland. So, and they bought into it. Wow, I intend to get my name out there. I'll go into a nuclear wasteland. You couldn't get me there with a gun to my head. You couldn't do it. I'm still not going. 12 years on, Fukushima farmers developing local specialties. They never stop growing food in nuclear wasteland. Try making that up on your own. 17,000 hectares of farmland in 12 municipalities. Crops planting was suspended only in 12% of the 12 municipalities, or 14% of the prefecture's farmland. But the entire half of the country was buried under radioactive fallout. There's evil, and then there's what Japan done. Residents returned slow after lifting of evacuation orders 12 year on. Thank goodness. Part of Fukushima Nami to exit evacuation orders March the 31st. Yeah, 3% of the land. Of the town, rather. Vice Foreign Minister calls for thorough International Atomic Energy Agency review of Fukushima discharge. Rafael Grossi, his job is to be as evil as he can be and get away with it. They have no redeeming qualities whatsoever. The International Atomic Energy Agency is not a regulatory agency. They don't have the authority for any country on the entire planet. They're a corporation, and a subsidy at that of UN, which is a military-industrial complex, which doesn't have any authority for any country worldwide, but yet every country worldwide is following its orders. Releasing Fukushima radioactive water won't cause harm. Moving to Fukushima, you'll have to kick out the bores first. don't worry about the bores. Worry about the nuclear wasteland that you're trying to move into. Race into low-carbon plastic, bringing hope to a struggling Fukushima town. Rather than abandon the town, which is the right moral and ethical thing to do, they're going to take radioactive rice and turn it into plastic in a nuclear wasteland. Fukushima governor vows return of all evacuees. This is Ichibori. An absolute demon. A real-life demon, this guy. A relentless scumbag in every sense of the word. In addition, the central government plans to introduce in difficult-to-return zones, which are nuclear wastelands, areas with relatively low radiation levels to which evacuees can return and start living. So, like we talked about this earlier, 3% of a town was opened up in Nami. And they wanted people to move in there to give them street creds. Not because it was safe, but to pretend it was safe. Like, if I went into the biggest dump you ever is on the planet, and I dug out a road, and then, because a dump you can see it, radiation you can't, right? But if I dug out 3% of the dump, of a dump, full of just, household garbage for 30, 40 years worth, then if I dig that out and put a house there and rent it out to you, that makes me a monster, right? If they do it, then they're just pro-nuclear. No, they're actually monsters. These are actually demons. Tokyo speeds up Fukushima plant's decarbonization with hydrogen. And hydrogen's awesome. But nuclear hydrogen is garbage. Japan remains it's the most intensive hydrogen you can produce is with nuclear. Nuclear is just stupid. Every facet of it. Japan remains the second worst in international rankings for women in the workforce. They're a bigoted country, man. Disaster to destination. Fukushima snow wows tourists. And they've used every dirty trick in the book to get people to go back there so they can have artificial statistics to suggest to more victims that it was safe to go there. It's all about pretending that it's safe. 10 years on, reconstruction tax continues to stir debate. Reconstruction tax. They taxed everybody to pay for the nuclear industry so that the people who bought the Fukushima stocks, the TIPCO stocks, so TIPCO stocks went down to 2 cents a stock or something from several dollars. So everybody abandoned their stocks in the first few days. The nuclear industry went in and scooped all those stocks up and has been working hard for years to drive up the stocks again. That's what it's all about. We're talking about huge monies. And they have influence. On the anniversary of Fukushima disaster, Australia must stand firm against nuclear. Thank you. But Dave Sweeney is not no good guy. He comes across as anti-nuclear, but he's just another Helen Caldicott or Ernie Gunnison, perpetual lawyers. Real slick operators. Straw men, if you will. On the anniversary of the Fukushima disaster, Australia must stand firm against nuclear. Sweeney's a friggin' snake. 12 years on, Fukushima town praises 2 British teachers. And we've covered, over the years, we've covered a lot of these stories of English teachers that work in a nuclear wasteland. And they must be getting some kind of bursary or monetary gain by writing articles claiming that Fukushima is wonderful. I mean, some of them live in the places where there's 1 million one-ton bags stored around town. So these are idiots. And they're teaching like grade school children. So if they didn't go there, the grade children might have to go somewhere safer. Food for thought. Only one couple returned after evacuation orders lifted in Fukushima. Fukushima, you can see the nuclear meltdown in Fukushima, which is joined onto Fukushima. It's north of Fukushima. 2 kilometers away where they're living, but you can still see the nuclear meltdowns and it's still melting down. EDF decides to keep 2 British nuclear plants running. That was nice of them. Imagine having another country tell you what you can have and can't have. That's United Kingdom. United Kingdom's a Muslim country, right? In the last couple of years, they brought in so many Muslims, you can't. It was about breaking up the country, breaking up the families, right? World's 15 biggest ships create more pollution than all the cars in the world. Think about that statement. 15 ships. How are we doing on the poll? We're still alive, are we? My apologies. You get caught up in these stories. Especially these kind of shows where there's just story after story after story. If you don't like the story, wait 3 seconds. Here comes another one. Was more than 2.2 grams of isotopes released at the Fukushima 4 nuclear reactors and 8 fuel pools. Why would anybody vote no? Like, how can you be that stupid? Like, really, how can anybody be that stupid? And only the nuclear industry would do it, obviously. But when you look at it, how can you suggest that only 2.2 grams got out of the buildings that had millions and millions of pounds each in? Because the official story is only 2.2 grams got out. That's the official story. Hence the reason we got that poll tonight, right? Then he says scumbag, quite like pro-nuclear, does it? Fukushima food fair opens in Hong Kong. Fukushima, a nuclear wasteland. Not a difficult return zone, but a nuclear wasteland. Japan court rules the state doesn't owe compensation to the victims. Well, who does? If you lose your home, if you lose your business, if you lose your livelihood, if you lose the ability, if you lose your pets, you lose all your possessions, you're displaced and you're thrown away like a paper towel. And the nuclear industry would always give hundreds of millions of dollars to fix their self. You're given nothing. And after 12 years, they offer you $12,000, $1,000 a year. Less than $100 a month. It's your fault you ran away. 2,500 people still unaccounted for from the quake and the tsunami and the disaster. There's 865,000 cancers in the first year, for goodness sakes. Evacuation plans still missing after 6 nuclear power plants. Around 6 nuclear power plants. So, like, one of the criteria for a nuclear power plant is you got to have an evacuation route so that people can run away, right? You gotta, like, if that doesn't make you hate nuclear, what does? If it breaks down, you're supposed to be able to run away. They're not going to set off the sirens, though. They learned their lessons. They're never going to tell you. Unless it's blatant, unless it blows up like Fukushima, they're never going to tell you. And then they show pictures like this and claim it's Fukushima. What's happening at the Fukushima plant 12 years after the meltdown? 12 years after 3/11, dispute grows over Fukushima radioactive soil. See, why is there a dispute, though? Because they want to reuse it to grow food. But why would you pick up 30 million one-ton bags and then the next administration comes in and says, hey, I know, let's grow food into it, rather than store it for thousands of years and pay for that? No, we're a nuclear industry. We don't do shit like that. Let's grow food into it and poison the fuckers, and then they can't complain no more. That's what they came up with. And even worse, they just dumped it into the ground. And then you see these walls up there? When it rains, it's going to run right straight down. They got rocks on the tarps, Dan, and that'll stop it from blowing away. And the typhoons comes through there at how fast again? Oh yeah, that's right, 155 miles per hour. Sure, they're going to stay there. You can trust the nuclear industry. Well, they got guards there protecting the Alps system, do they? It's never worked. It can't work. You can't filter radiation. You can't filter it. You gotta collect everything. You can't filter it. Like the reactors each reactor normally uses 4,500 tons, 1 million gallons a minute. of water, which is enough water to fill all the tanks they got there 5 times each day. 12 years after 311, dispute grows over Fukushima radioactive soil. Fukushima is still on the road to recovery. Like, you can't decommission a normal plant for 60 years, but you're going to decommission Fukushima multiple nuclear meltdowns in 30 years. And who's going to do it again? Oh, that's right. The homeless, the destitute, the victims of society, and the immigrants that don't speak the language. They don't have the ability to do it. Abe aids bullies the ministry like a loony Yakuza. Oh, poor Abe. He got shot and killed like the piece of shit that he was. It was probably one of the happiest days I had in the last 12 years. Yeah, probably the only really super happy day where I watched the videos of him getting shot over and over and over. I used to wake up in the morning for weeks and watch the video of him getting shot. Because he's the guy who shipped food worldwide, poisoned billions of people, and destroyed their lives. 12 years after Fukushima, Japan's nuclear dreams are about to end. Fukushima cleanup costs. This is all the headlines from this year that we covered, and sometimes I'll bring in headlines from earlier years for supporting documentation for certain stories. So you might have seen some of that earlier too. Fukushima cleanup costs swells with no end in sight. They spent $7 billion each year since 2011. They spent the real numbers are over a couple of $100 billion, for goodness sakes, not $7 billion a year. Japan to lift evacuation orders for parts of Fukushima town, March 10, 2023. So parts is like 3%. Don't cross the street. Don't stop the car. When you leave your house, you got to leave the town. You can't turn the car around. You got to go out of the town, 30 miles, turn the car around to come back if you forgot something. You can't stop. You got to keep going. Food for thought. Farmers torn between his land and family has to die alone. Well, he's in a nuclear wasteland. Like, he normally goes back to his home 30 miles away. He only goes there once a week. And the media spun it and blew it completely out of proportion. 12 years after Fukushima nuclear disaster, reintroduction of nuclear power is a burden on the future. That's an understatement. Japan marks 12 years since the quake and tsunami that led to the Fukushima crisis. And they always do that, right? You won't find a single story out there where they don't immediately assign blame to the tsunami and the earthquake. It doesn't matter what happened because they don't want you to think nuclear is bad, see? And they're anal about it. Consumers hesitate about buying Fukushima food keeps decreasing. Consumers hesitant about buying deadly radioactive food from a nuclear wasteland keep decreasing. Well, that's propaganda for you, right? It works really well. It's very effective. And there's not really no dissenting voices out there, is it? Tropical fruit farming on the rise in cold Fukushima. Tropical fruit. And who get the yuppies, right? Because they like the tropical fruit. Fukushima policemen preparing for evacuees' returns. There was actually over 300 policemen that died, just dropped dead. Most of them from renal kidney failure. We thank Japan for its transparent efforts. Transparent. Fukushima nuclear contaminated water. I'm just going to dump them on them. Green growth. Evacuation orders be lifted in more parts of Fukushima prefecture town close to the stricken nuclear plant. Sake exports sets a record high for 2022 for the 13th year in a row. 13 years non-stop sake grew. You know what they make sake out of? Radioactive rice that nobody will buy. What's happening at the Fukushima plant 12 years after the meltdown? Again, every time you see Mari Yamaguchi, you should be very, very worried. So they're suggesting they're going to dump water, which they've never stopped dumping. They can't contain it. There's nothing to contain it with. The buildings are completely gone. All the inventories were gone on day 5, and the residue left over, which is still quite significant, has caused the site to be completely lethal. 1,000 tanks, Dana. So there. Yeah, they had 1,000 2013. Fukushima, they built the tanks to manipulate you into thinking it didn't melt down, see? Contaminated soil piles up in vast Fukushima cleanup project. Well, that's not true. They only lost 2.2 grams of tritium. Don't you know that? The International Atomic Energy Agency said so, Dana. None of this is real. So, Matt, this is how you're moving 30 million one-ton bags. How long is it going to take you to do it with these trucks? How many trucks do you need? There's a mathematical equation. New businesses bloom and disaster hit Fukushima. These are not disaster, these are nuclear wastelands. And they're in NAMI, so just because you got a greenhouse don't mean it's safe. You can't stop the air from getting in the greenhouse, for goodness sakes. You can't stop the gammas, the X-rays, the neutrons, the beta rays from outside from pulsing into the greenhouse itself. Even if you could stop the radiation, which you can't. A Fukushima hometown revival. I can't remember the name of the town. I got a map coming up though. That's the rice planting dance. And then they ran away again. They come into the town, they done the dance, and then they ran away because it's a nuclear wasteland. So his house, Kono's house, is right in the middle of a nuclear wasteland. The red is a nuclear wasteland. So the yellow is what they're opening up 2023. The white is what they open up in 2022. So look where his house is, right in the middle of a nuclear wasteland. It's like going in a paint booth where you're painting cars and eating your lunch every single day. And you got double employees in their painting at lunchtime each day. And you're going to go in there and they're spraying paint everywhere. And you're going to go and eat your lunch and you got all your clean clothes on. You're not going to get no paint on you. You're going to eat your lunch and you're going to take your time, read the paper, drink your tea, and you're going to head off to work an hour later. And no adverse effects. And that no one's ever going to know you were in the painting house doing all of that. Right? It's just it's craziness to even, except it's radiation and it's lethal. Because you can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't hear it, you can't feel it, you can't taste it. Like this is insane to suggest that you can clean out a little section in a nuclear wasteland and that is habitable. It's absurd. It's 100% absurd. Evacuation orders were lifted in some of the pockets. Some of these stories I almost want to scream, right? Because it's so crazy that they would do this to somebody and their families. How can you justify moving people into a nuclear wasteland just so the nuclear industry can pretend that it's not a nuclear wasteland? Fukushima man battles to keep hometown on the maps and in memories, but why? Like you're an idiot that you want people to go back to a nuclear wasteland. You're the problem. You should be arrested. You should be shipped out of the country too, to a jail somewhere else because you're too stupid to be in a Japanese jail. Look at Nami up there. We talked about Nami a number of times tonight. This is 2023 story, by the way. And so look at the map they're showing here, 2023. This is a nuclear wasteland, but officially nothing got out that's not a nuclear wasteland. Despite the same media that's telling you this story is now telling you that never happened. The same media from Japan and everywhere else have been telling you for 12 years that this happened. Since July the 13th, 2023 of this year is telling you it never happened. Because they destroyed your planet. That's why they changed their song. Fukushima victims feel left out. They should be happy they're left out. And I don't mean that in a good way, but as long as they're left out of Fukushima, they got a chance of a future. Fukushima food ban for 11 years. 14 prefectures banned the food in 55 countries rather, from 14 prefectures for over a decade. Removal of fuel rods began at Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant. That's over there. But that's what it actually looked like underneath that over there. That's CBC News Canada. The missing fool's pool, as a lot of people like to call them. We know where they're to. They covered the planet in about 31 days. The entire planet. So this is 31 days when this stops. That's 31 days later. So even if the radiation stopped coming out of there at 31 days, we covered the entire planet. There's no, we destroyed the water and the precious, wonderful, beautiful water on this planet. The most precious thing on the planet is water. We have to protect it for the 8 million species and for our loved ones and then ourselves. Freddy defies odds is the world's longest lived invisible cyclone. Longest lived post-Fukushima. All of this stuff is normal now post-Fukushima. Dubbing the storm is extremely rare, won't just cut it anymore. Freddy's now something never seen before, a truly one-of-a-kind tropical cyclone. Thanks, Fukushima. The zombie cyclone is probably still out there alive today. EU rewrites climate diplomacy deal to resolve nuclear sticking points. Yeah, what the EU done this year was despicable. This geothermal startup shows its wells can be used like giant underground batteries. So geothermal not only can produce energy 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it also can be used as a battery. You can store energy down there and be able to pull it out on a drop of a hat and feed it to the grid. Hungarian authorities hold multi-city promotions of geothermal. Had a nuclear lobby scuttle the EU's anti-greenwashing tool. Scumbags to member states' pressures in giving nuclear energy a sustainable label as a key regulation could derail the EU's climate progress. And there's 1,100 useful idiots, right, in the Parliament of the EU, and it was something 555 voted to call nuclear green, and 545 voted not to, and so stupid won out, and they called it green. The 18 million investment by Terrestrial will also create 29 jobs over the next 2 years as works to develop a small modular reactor. That's Bill Gates. Isn't it Terrestrial Energy? Disgusting Bill Gates. New nuclear plants have turned into money pits. They've always been money pits, right? France's nuclear watchdog said corrosion cracks flagged by EDF at the Penally 1 reactor. Oh, let's have a look at that. It's not surrounded by farms by chance, is it? Oh, that's right, it's surrounded by farms. How come all nuclear power plants are surrounded by farms, Dana? Because that's how they keep the radiation levels locally down. The fuel pools can't contain it, see? They're still splitting the plutonium, the uranium, the curium isotopes. And that's vented out to tall, skinny stacks. You see the two tall, skinny stacks? That's venting from the fuel pools and the incinerators. Oh, that's right, they got incinerators on these sites. You didn't know that, did you? Corrosion in nuclear reactors. France had 29 reactors offline last year. It's absurd. And you don't got any glaciers anymore, and the Rhine River is dependent upon the glaciers. So the nuclear industry, I can't see how they can build more reactors when they don't even have the water for the reactors they got. Before getting in full detail of the reports, World Nuclear News spoke to Corinne Parr, CEO of Nuclear Waste Services. There is no nuclear waste services. There's these companies with their names, but they don't actually do anything. And World Nuclear News, when did they use the name? Why would they use the word World Nuclear News? Why don't they ever put their names on the articles, on their propaganda articles? Vistra moves more deeply into nuclear power with planned $3.43 billion acquisition of Energy Harbor. Big money, because you get all these payouts from the government, all that free money from the government. That'll get taken off quite quick. Support for nuclear energy grows in Hungary. Like, the support they're talking about is manufactured support. It's not actual enthusiasm. Ex-Ghana executive sentenced to prison for his role in VC Summer's nuclear fiasco. Well, he stole billions of dollars and he got to pay back $1 million, is it? And he's got to do a couple of months in jail. It's just good business. Would you go to jail for a couple of months if you can pull off $30, $40, $50, $60 million and walk away with it? I know you would. Atomic Bamboozle probes false hopes for the future of nuclear power. Atomic Bamboozle. What, like, you see all these documentaries coming out, and they get all kinds of media attention. They get all kinds of accolades in the film industry and stuff like that. But why won't a single fucking one of them acknowledge what happened to Fukushima? Not one. Not friggin' one on the entire planet will acknowledge it. Nobody. And they all say the opposite on top of that. Oh, the nuclear bombs are going to get you, right? There's tons of them out there doing that routine. That's scam. They get all the media, too. The media is happy to stick them up there. None of them will acknowledge these pictures. Not one of them will acknowledge Fukushima lost all their reactors. Not one of them. That is the atomic bamboozle, see? Compensation sought for victims of nuclear weapons development. Yeah. 70 years later, still can't get any compensation. Don't worry, TEPCO might give them $12,000 down the road. Boot County sues Department of Energy over nuclear waste storage. I can't remember the story behind that. Declassified footage unveils a terrifying force of 1946 underwater nuclear blast. The problem with the underwater nuclear blast was they liberated the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyballs, spherical balls. And it's able to ingest uranium, plutonium, and all the other isotopes and become super hot particles. And they knew about this back in the 50s and 60s. Because this was highly lethal fallout because of the sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyball effect. It was determined they would have needed to grind these ships down to almost nothing before they were at a safe radiation levels. So what changed? And these plumes covered the whole planet. It's disgusting what they've done. And they can radiate other objects forever. So these are insidious monsters, these emissions. British submarines in Gibraltar sparks a row of putting Spain at risk of a nuclear disaster. So the nuclear subs from Britain are with nuclear weapons. Gibraltar is protesting them being in their country because if they have an accident, they poison their country, right? Which is pretty smart, you ask me. Former Bond girl Denise Richards opened about flack towards her 007 character and how she looks at the experience 25 years later. It's just Hollywood, kids. Come on, stop being so hard on these useless actors, for goodness sakes. Speaking of useless, Bruce Power, Canadian Bruce Power, named one of Canada's best diversity employers of 2023. They poison everybody and they're getting awards. They're so good, they're so pretty, they're so nice. I love my cancer. I love my Alzheimer's. I love my diabetes. Yay, I got diabetes. God bless Bruce Power. You're so wonderful. Mr. Wonderful, Bruce Power. Bruce Power, the wonderful. Northern Power nomination for Sellafield. Sellafield is the biggest nuclear wasteland in Europe, for goodness sakes. International Women's Day 2023. 14 photos marking 40 years since Greenham Common nuclear weapons protest. It's around 30,000 women protested nuclear weapons. And they beat the shit out of a lot of them, right? The police did. They were loving it. EDF and Italy, Italian partners, team up to support nuclear development in Europe. The nuclear got so much support. They got everything given to them. Everything. They were born with the silver spoon in their mouths. They got all the money you can throw at them. They still can't get it right. Because they steal 90% of it. Goes to administrations, eh? But it's crazy, isn't it? All these decades of giving them whatever they want, whatever you need. You can have everything. You can have all the precious metal the country got. Everything. You can have everything. We'll give you you can go into universities and pick and choose the best students. We'll give you everything you need, and you still can't fucking do it. We gave you everything you could ever dream of. Any other company would have turned it into a super company. Not you fuckers, though, no. Not you fuck-ups, no way. All you can do is fuck up. That's the only thing you're actually good at. And we're actually experts at. Ukraine's top nuclear plant lost power for the 6th time. They probably melted down. The only thing I regret is that Russia didn't snipe that fucking piece of shit right there. That would have been awesome to snipe that piece of shit out. What a disgusting parasite he turned out to be to humanity. House bill would lift nuclear power construction moratorium. Like, there's lots of states that don't have a moratorium. They still don't build nuclear. 80 ex-nuclear workers demand government halt crazy legislative blitz. 80 ex-nuclear workers. I'm not even going to go there. Nuclear attack sees Russia's told to take anti-radiation pills and rush to bunkers. That's got to be United Kingdom scumbag media, isn't it? Or Australian. Putin's $274 million spy plane destroyed by a drone sabotagers as the air base in Belarus. He got tons of them. He don't care. Nuclear Waste Management Organization, which is, why do they call themselves that when they've never managed any waste ever at any single time? And no intentions, but looks of it for at least another 100 years, which is Canadian. It's the industry themselves on top of that. You're going to put the industry in charge of their own nuclear waste. That's really clever. Taking an extra year to pick storage site as it seeks local support. It's seeking to divide the local. Look at the farmland. It bought 1,600 acres of prime farmland. But it doesn't even know if it's geologically feasible to put it there. But he went and bought it anyway. So much, they got $28 billion. They don't care. They're not going to be building a nuclear holding site with it, so might as well spend it on something. So much for nuclear waste management organizations claim that it is a community-driven process. Oh, it's the furthest thing from a community-driven process. The idea is that the community, one half hate the other half, so when they vote they say no, and then the nuclear waste management organizations like, oh, well, we got to go find other communities and spend 5 years checking it out. All is good. No big deal. Have a nice day. Here, take another couple of million before we walk away. 2 arrested for allegedly having seditious books. Seditious. National Security Police arrested 2 women because of certain books. Going to cause sedition. Taiwan shuts down another nuclear plant, threatening blackouts and more emissions. Look, they had the money, they had the equipment, they had the authority, they had everything at their fingertips to build something to replace it. So when the plant is finally ready to shut down because it's old and fragile and brittle, well, we got nothing to replace it. We got to keep it open. Sorry. So those people should be put in jail for not building something to replace it. And then immediately, they're going to have blackouts if we throw it down. Government to step up testing of Japanese food products. 2023. Well, how come you didn't check it for the last 12 years? You do realize it melted down, stupid? Europe's readiness to respond to a nuclear disaster, learning from Chernobyl and Fukushima. Europe has no readiness whatsoever. Europe has gone blindly into the deep. China's newspaper accused of skewing Fukushima water release details. And they rolled out this slut. I think I emailed her that picture and said, really? You think that doesn't exist? You think there's really not an issue? But see, they got all the media willing to come out and attack you for saying, wait a second. But see, all China got to do is show that picture, right? That's all China got to do, and they'll shut everybody up. Nobody will Japan will never touch them again. Japan will hands off China. Don't say nothing to China. Don't mention China ever again. That's all China got to do is show those two pictures. Can you imagine? Imagine if Greenpeace tweeted out those two pictures and said, hey, they've been hoodwinking you for 12 years. All the fuel is gone from the pools and the reactors, folks. That's the end of nuclear worldwide. That's the end of it. Oh, Big Mad Thursday. Europe's readiness to respond to a nuclear disaster. There is no readiness. How are you going to respond to a nuclear disaster? Nobody's ever done it before. How are you going to do it? Sake exports set record high in 2022 for the 13th year in a row from a nuclear wasteland. Yeah, they only done that to make the nuclear wasteland looked like it had some attributes, that were... Public warned over a missing radioactive cylinder in Thailand. We covered the stories about it last night where they lost a piece the size of my fingernail in Australia in a 1,400-mile stretch. And so they drove along at high speed with the Geiger counters, and they found it. And they got out and they tracked it down, and they put it in a big lead container, and they brought it to wherever it wanted to go. And when they were asked about it, they said the people that drove past it at 60 miles per hour on the highways got the same dose as an X-ray or two. Well, these kind of X-rays are totally different from the one you get in the hospital, by the way. These are real X-rays. So they got serious doses that would affect their health for the rest of their lives, just driving past it at 60 miles per hour. So imagine taking a kilogram of it and putting it in the wall at the subway station. Everybody walks past it that day, dies every day for millions of years. Because the energy never goes away, see? School in quake-hit Japan region set to reopen after 12 years. They actually they bring the children from 35 miles away to go to school in the nuclear wasteland where nobody lives, 2 miles from ongoing meltdowns. And then at the end of the day, they ship to school by bus back to their communities. Some of them live 80 miles away, or 80 kilometers away, in order to say nuclear is not so bad. See, because children are going to school there. Why would you send children into a nuclear wasteland? UK classes nuclear as environmentally sustainable and unveils small modular reactor support. Again, this is one, like all of these stories, when you look at it at the end of the year, because this March the 16th, 2023, this year, we're going through the March month as a recap. But when you look at it in the context like we're doing the last 2 nights and the night, you really see that the industry is nothing but degenerates. They're unbelievable degenerates. They just make stuff up all the time for headlines because that's what they're getting paid to do, right? And you can see that the public relation firms like the International Atomic Energy Agency and UNSCLEAR and IRPA and the IPRC's hands in all of these stories. Regulators monitor tritium leak in Minnesota nuclear plant. Remember that? Leak. So when did 400,000 gallons become a leak? Did the nuclear industry build nuclear power plants in farmlands worldwide to maim, poison, and kill people? Yeah, Dan, of course they did. That's pretty obvious. That was a bunch of dolphins. I guess we might see that again this year. For the first time in history, washed up dead on our beaches here 3 times last winter. We went down all 3 times. It was really something. Look at the advertisement on my video. Oh, that's not my video. That's their video. Fukushima radioactive water release, crime against humanity. Saturday, March the 18th, 2023. Like, all they got to do in that crime against humanity to convince people that it was a crime against humanity would have been to show these 2 pictures. Say, look, it's been hemorrhaging there for 12 years straight, folks. They're lying to you. That's the end of nuclear, right? Jeremy Hunt wants nuclear power class as sustainable. UK Chancellor. Like, when you look at the United Kingdom or anywhere else worldwide, they're surrounded by farms. These are disease factories. The fuel pools never stop hemorrhaging radiation. How is this even possible? Well, it's only possible because all the universities and all the medias hate your guts and are complicit in doing this to you. Sustainable label for nuclear angers green campaigners. Look at all the cement pumps. Like, the amount of cement they got there is enough to build a sidewalk all the way to Rome, to your United Kingdom. It's absurd what we're talking about. You're talking about something like 80,000 cement trucks. It's absurd amount. And then everything there has to be bear with me here. Let me delete everything we've done so far so I don't accidentally get lost and have to find my way back. Because that would be a tragedy. We're almost there. Let's go to the next one now. UK classes nuclear is environmentally sustainable. So what? If it was so environmentally sustainable, how come they haven't built any in the last 30 years? Regulators monitored tritium leak at Minnesota nuclear plant. So they waited 4 months before they told you they lost 400,000 gallons, which you know is going to be 1,000 times that. They waited 4 months to tell you. And then they waited another 2 weeks before they checked the Mississippi River for radiation. And lo and behold, they didn't find anything above regulatory limits. That's their words, right? They waited 4 months to tell you and 4 months and 2 weeks to check. So they let everything wash all the way down to Mississippi for 4 months and 2 weeks before they checked it. And this is Monticello. What do you see in the background? Surely that can't be farms. They wouldn't be that evil to put nuclear power plants close to farms, would they? Nah, that's crazy talk, Dana. Xcel Energy, Monticello nuclear power plant. Dick Clark, is it? I can't remember. Yeah, Dick Clark. You know, the people in the community should have kicked the shit out of him when they had the chance. Nuclear plant near Minneapolis reports a leak of tainted water. Yeah, 4 months after it happens. It's not a leak. Notice always the word leak. Leak. UN Nuclear Watchdog says 2.5 tons of uranium has gone missing in Libya. Turns out it wasn't. And the International Atomic Energy Agency says nothing got out of the buildings whatsoever, only 2.2 grams. How much got out of the buildings? Nothing, Dana, only 2.2 grams. Nuclear partially included in the EU Net Zero Industry Act. Partially included. Well, by summer they included the entire thing, right? EU Net Zero Industry Act makes the EU the home of clean tech industries. Germany, Spain push to keep nuclear out of the EU renewable energy goals. Well, you can't stop nuclear from being a scumbag. That's what we know for a fact. They got all the cards, and the decks are stacked. Nuclear will be produced in Ukraine and exported to European countries. Like, actually, nuclear fuel will not be produced in Ukraine and exported. But think about how crazy they are to put that out in March of this year. And if that was gone through a chain reaction, he'd be dead before he picks it up. Disgusting parasites for taking those pictures. Regulators monitor tritium leak. Regulators. There is no pipes at any nuclear power plants that only carry tritium. There is none. And that the ones that they said was broken were high pressure ones because they had to shut the plant down to fix it, which meant they're high pressure lines. And there's so many people out there to sell your soul. That's their job, is to sell you out. And the nuclear industry is 100% of them. Rolls-Royce wins funding for nuclear-powered moon-based research. Of course they win funding. There's no competition, right? For micro-reactors. Again, a lot of the rockets explode on the way up, right? That's going to be carrying plutonium-238. Enough to give everybody on the planet cancer a few times over. Small reactors could empower First Nations with energy security. Yeah? So could geothermal, stupid. And I can never understand the NuScale's design. It's just atrocious. It's downright ugly, isn't it? Again, the only thing it can remind you of is an upside down ice cream container that's cut in two. And if you do manage to build one, it'll never look like that. It'll never come close to looking like that. Australia deployed 220 Tomahawk cruise missiles from the United States. What would Australia do with that? Like, really, what could Australia... Who the fuck is Australia going to attack or be in war against that they can do it on their own? Name somebody. Anybody. Like the Marshall Islands? That's about the only people they're capable of beating. The penny finally drops on nuclear energy. Penny Wong! Newfound fate, nuclear... Newfound fate. And she's Australian, right? Gives hopes to every person battling to pay their skyrocketing power bills. Penny Wong! If they just get rid of the stupid submarines and take that money, $370 billion, they can build twice the energy they need in geothermal and never have an issue for hundreds of years. And just charge people $25 a month to get all the free energy they could ever want. And tons of money to pay for expenses, right? For maintenance, cheap maintenance, and to rebuild and to build new places down the road, 50 years down the road. 1.5 million liters of radioactive water leaked from a nuclear plant in Minnesota. Look at the farmlands in the background. And they waited 4 months to tell you, and then another 2 weeks passed that before they even checked it. The Mississippi River, which feeds 20-odd thousand farms downstream from it, and millions and millions and millions of people, and is an estuary nursery for a marine species at the mouth of the ocean, where it comes out. Build a movement to oppose the Australian submarines. If you took the money, you can have a real country instead of a country struggling thanks to... See, what happened was, after Fukushima, 7 of the top 10 weapons producers set up shop in Australia. This was 5 or 6 years after the American military set up a base down there. And the first thing that happened when the Americans set up the military base in Australia, because I covered it, was there was a whole bunch of brothels set up within a few miles of the new military base, and there was several hundred children went missing across Australia. And guess where they were found? This is standard modus operatus for military bases, by the way, to create brothels, go and steal children from communities within 100 miles and set up brothels for the military soldiers. Public now being notified of nuclear power plant spill 4 months ago. And at least it didn't say leak. I respect him for that. NuScale must triple subscription levels for small modular reactors in Idaho by the early 2024, the company says. Must triple subscriptions. Well, all the money pulled out of there about 2 months ago, right? Because it was, at that point, they couldn't deny what I've been telling them for 5 years, is that NuScale has no intention of wasting their money trying to build a reactor because they know they can't. It's strictly about stealing the money. It was 100% Ponzi scheme, right? Used the future investors' money to pay off the old investors to keep the Ponzi scheme alive while they siphon off 90% of the money to administration. It couldn't exist otherwise, right? NuScale wouldn't exist if they didn't do that. Germany and Spain declare war on nuclear energy, and here's why they may regret it. Germany and Spain won't regret it. They had no choice. They had 75,000 workers a year were poisoned by radiation at the nuclear plants, for goodness sakes. Japan urges Hong Kong to weigh scientific evidence for curbing seafood imports over radioactive water disposal. Well, the problem was, right, this is to perpetrate the lie that tritium was released. Like, so the reactors actually melted down. There they are. And all you need to do is any country in the world come out and say, look, this is what Fukushima actually looks like under those fake covers they're using. All the fuel is gone. All the reactor cores are gone. All the fuel pools are gone. And guess what? So is the nuclear industry. It's gone right behind that. And say they're lying to you about the tritium. You got to worry about the uranium, the plutonium, the americium, the neptuniums, the strontiums, the thousands of fission products. This is why I fucking hate nuclear scumbags so much. They're just scumbags. They're just scumbags. They're not, no attributes of a human whatsoever. They're just fucking scumbags. Back to Fukushima. Surfers return to the beaches 12 years on. Yeah, surfers are not noted for being overly smart, are they? Climate alarmist, new form of colonialism. I can't even pronounce it. I'm starting to swear. I can't pronounce words. That's not good. I guess this will be the last show until Sunday. If I does a show on Sunday, which is New Year's Eve, it's going to be early. Not too early, but it'll be earlier. It won't be a later show, so people can get out and celebrate their midnight festivities. And because there was a humdinger last night, 4 hours and 20 minutes. And we've been on a marathon for the last couple of weeks, right? U.S. maternal death rates rise sharply in 2021. Maternal death rates. Oh, this... look at the word leak. Look at it. They just, this is pure propaganda. Look at the propaganda. Leak. This is all the Monticello nuclear power plant. They waited 4 months to tell you. It was really something. This story here is insane. So this is a hospital. I'm not sure if this is Futaba or Akuma, which are both left in south and north of the plant. They're joined onto the plant site, these communities. They're abandoned. And this hospital is abandoned. And they were here in 2019. And in 2019, there was $1 billion worth of equipment in the hospital because they have footage of it. So they went back this year, and guess what? Everything is gone. So where did $1 billion worth of hospital equipment, and you ever been in a hospital, every room is packed with supplies, right? And don't mind these garbage cans, these are garbage. So where did everything go? Where did all the operating, the beds, where did all the equipment, the monitors, the x-ray machines, the CAT scans, the blah, 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 the endless equipment that goes in the hospital. Every room is packed with supplies, right? $1 billion worth of equipment. And they got pictures of what it used to look like, and now there's nothing there. Where did it go? Where did all this radioactive hospital equipment end up, I wonder? It's shocking. So this is the previous episodes where you see all the equipment in the rooms, right? All the incubators for the babies. They were there a few years ago, and it was full of stuff. Now it's empty. Where did $1 billion worth of hospital equipment go to? It's crazy that there's hospitals that are using this equipment, and people are in radioactive beds and radioactive monitors alongside their faces and their heads and their loved ones. Radioactive baby equipment being used. Disgusting. And it can only be done with the help of the Japanese government. They couldn't have done it without the Japanese government looking the other way. And that's the theaters, the operating theaters. I think there got some pictures. There it is there. That's what it looked like in 2019. That's what it looks like in 2023, completely empty. 2019, 2023, the same rooms. Right? All this equipment is gone. Where could it go? So they actually went into the nuclear wasteland. If they're willing to do that, what else have they shipped worldwide from these places? From these nuclear wastelands? Because that's what it used to look like, full of all kinds of equipment. It's less than 2 miles from the nuclear plant, so it's either Kuma or Futaba. So where did all this equipment go? I mean, they cleaned it out. They're not going to reuse it. They're not going to restock it. It's a nuclear wasteland, right? This was taken and sold in the black market, or even reused in Japan somewhere. Who knows? I think it's just frightening, because this is what it used to look like. Every room was packed full of stuff, and now it's all gone. So this is the older footage you're looking at. Nothing says scumbag quite like nuclear, does it? Because this is your typical room in a hospital. It's stuffed. It's just stuffed full of equipment, right? That's a typical hospital room. As you've seen at the beginning, there's nothing in the rooms. Everything is gone, is empty. And their solutions are never really solutions. Oh, we're going to put it down in a hole in the ground, Dana. They're safe for 1 million years. Well, what happens is it melts down. If you leave it alone, it's going to melt down. And eventually it's going to crack the earth open. That's going to be released into the environment. Yeah, last night was a tough night. How are we doing here? Oh, we're up to 2 hours, are we? Yeah. Let me see what we got here. Let's keep going. Nuclear waste borehole demonstration center started. So the borehole center. They're going to drill a hole down into the earth and drop a canister down there, and then put asphalt and cement and compacted bentonite to catch radiation. This is the theory, right? But it's not just going to leak straight down. It's going to catch fire. It's going to burn at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. And if any water shows up there, it doesn't need oxygen, by the way, to burn. And when water finally shows up there, because it'll draw the water there with all the heat, it'll start consuming everything around it. The pressure will build up. It'll detonate. It'll crack the earth, and then it'll hemorrhage radiation out of the earth for millions of years. That's what happens to nuclear waste when you put it in a deep geological repository scenario. Public to have a say on plans to bury the radioactive waste. And the public is going to be told it's like a banana and a potato chip, walking in sunshine and climbing mountains and getting on airplanes. That's probably the only... These birds are probably not even real. The cows are. This is Sellafield, obviously. And it's surrounded by farms. Because evil is just natural. So they're going to stuff the fuel rod assemblies into the one on the right. Then they're going to take the one on the right and put it in the one on the left, which is a copper containment. And they say it won't melt down for millions of years if they do that. But this stuff will destroy the integrity of the one it's in and the copper in 30 or 40 years, from gamma shines, the X-rays, the neutron bombardments, the beta rays. Another plant, another farmland in the background. I hate her guts. I despise her. She's a low-life scumbag from UK, of course. A permanent nuclear waste storage facility is long overdue. Well, you can't do it because the fumes that builds up are very volatile, and eventually they'll detonate and crack the earth open. Nuclear weapons crash tests in Crumbia beset by blunders. Yeah, it's nuclear. What do you expect? They are one big blunder. France's nuclear bomber with 12 solid fuel rockets. The Mirage 4. Like, what France done to the French Polynesians was equal to a Nagasaki bomb every week for 12 years in fallout. Is that a nuclear war? Is that a nuclear war? What they done to Niger for put them into a civil war for 60 years so they can get their hands on cheap, high-grade uranium at low cost. They destroyed the entire country. Activists raise concern about toxic water disposal at 3 Mile Island. Yeah, the gift that never gives. In fact, they boiled off several million gallons of unbelievably radioactive water. Lake Barrett and Arnie Gunnarsson was running that, right? After a couple of years because people stopped watching. So instead of storing it for a million years, they just boiled it off into your environment and poisoned you for thousands of years. Nuclear watchdog emailed the governor to place a moratorium to ensure no toxic water is dumped into the Susquehanna River, which 3 Mile Island was doing it for decades. I'm not saying go ahead and do it. I'm just saying they forgot to mention that it's been going on for decades. Equipment related to Japan's nuclear wastewater release starts operations. Equipment. And of course, this is not true. They've been releasing it non-stop since the 5th day in 2011, March the 15th, March the 16th. Worried about nuclear waste? Democrats are largely to blame. What are you blaming Democrats for? The nuclear industry is to blame, not the Democrats, not the left, not the right, not the far left, not the far right, not the extreme left, not the extreme rights. Regulator, nuclear plant leak didn't require public notice. They're talking about Monticello. Nuclear plant leak didn't require public notice. You just keep moving the goalpost until you have no rights. Oh, right, we passed that thing about 30 years ago. Congress must recognize the urgency at Hanford. Well, Hanford must recognize the urgency of Congress. Hanford, of course, is besieged by stupid. They dumped so much toxin into the soil. It was 450 billion gallons that they admit to. Can you imagine how much is actually in there? And this was high-level stuff. This was like, oh my goodness. And it's equal to a 6-foot wide aquarium, 518 feet tall, wrapped around the entire planet more than once. Don't worry, everything will fit in a swimming pool, right? And nothing got out, only 2.2 grams, Dana, out of Fukushima on top of that. This is some of the 177 tanks when they were building them. And then they filled it in with soil to shield people from above, right? Because of the huge emissions we're talking about with betas and alphas and neutrons and gammas. And they built 177 of the tanks, but they dumped 1.4 million of the tanks into the soil before they built the tanks. And then the tanks were used to manipulate you into thinking that if you can do that, then it's cleaned up. Hinkley Point Housing will squeeze Somerset Village residents. Hinkley Point is building a new reactor, trying to. And they need accommodations for an extra 9,000 people in a village with 1,000 people. So they have to bring in all kinds of temporary housing because, you know, that's so resource free. They like to call it net zero and carbon free and all this other stuff. They're the most resource intensive sites in human history. Toxic spill, Red Hill fire suppressant impacted soil. The forever chemicals, so called. But the real forever chemicals is nuclear. Everything else will break down eventually. 400,000 gallons of radioactive water leaked. Like when you got 400,000 gallons, how many 45-gallon drums is that? I can't remember. 10,000 was it or something? Let me see if I can bring it up. I'll bring it up on the screen for us. So you got 400,000 gallons. And you're going to divide it by 55-gallon drums. So is 7,270 45-gallon drums a leak? If I say I got a leak, and you say, well, how many paper towels do you need? I say, well, I need enough paper towels for 400,000 gallons. Are you going to say, well, okay, that's pretty good. Thank God that's only a leak. French nuclear joint to explore potential uranium deposit in Niger. French nuclear joint. They exhausted one supply and they knew bloody well the other one was right there because they never come alone. Limited space, no excuse for water dump, China Daily Editor. Well, China Daily Editorial should have said there's no excuse. There's no excuse for China not showing that picture. Limited space, no excuse, says scumbags. Why sacrificing UK industry and comfort for ideology is insanity. Like the pro-nuclear is insanity. The father of India's nuclear program, you piece of shit, I hope you're rotting in hell. Nuclear reactors are nothing like the Homer Simpson image. And they got to say that because a lot of people are so indoctrinated to the propaganda machine, they actually think that they have things in common. Citizens from nuclear technology awareness recognized 5 years of young professional outreach. Hey, come on over and join the nuclear club. We'll take good care of you. You gotta earn your admittance by working at Hanford for a couple of years, but then we'll get you a good job if you survive. With Rocket Boys Season 2, we'll look at the life and contribution. Remember Rocket Boys? It's a real fancy Hollywood show about a kid that pioneered rockets anyway. But it's based upon Indian nuclear program, Homi J. Babadha. Not an American. It's a very sweet show, right? If you've never seen it, it's worth watching. Tomahawk missiles to make Collins-class lethal. Australia will field long-range Tomahawk strike missiles on submarines years before it takes possession of its first U.S. Virginia-class nuclear-powered boats. Australia's so stupid to do this. It's like you're idiots to do this. Right, you got 7 out of 10 biggest weapons producer in their country, and that's why this money is necessary, is to feed them. And Australia will get the dirty end of the stick. It'll destroy the livelihoods of endless people in Australia. If you took the money and you turned it into geothermal, you can have free energy for the rest of your life. You can be heroes. You can be loved and admired by many, many generations for your forward thinking. Government defense cause the nuclear submarines protect the trade routes. Submarines is not going to protect your trade routes. What are you going to do? Nuke anybody you don't like? What are you, stupid or something? Become a nuclear doctor. Flinders owns huge submarine deals. Take a look at some of the great work our homegrown defense technology companies are already doing. You should read that story because that story actually talks about the 7 of the top 10 biggest weapons producers. It's bizarre. I should have dragged more of the story in, but we're only trying to do a recap of the stories that we covered in March 2000. And all of these headlines, if you type them in my site, the majority of them, you'll find the video. And you'll find links below the video. You'll find these headlines below the videos, right? Marathon effort to light the way for the military. Marathon effort. If you'd done the same effort to light the way for geothermal, you wouldn't have any problems, would you? You morons. You morons. Immersed in the reality of learning, the reality of sucking your country dry and giving the money to the military-industrial complex is what you're talking about. 268 billion to 368 billion. No. 368 billion to infinity is more like it, right? There's no way they're getting off that cheap. Because they always come in low balls, see? And when you get so down the hole you can't get out of it, that's when the truth comes out. No, you got to give us your firstborns too. Submarines won't compel Australia to join the Taiwan conflict. Like shit, it won't. You'll do whatever IAEA tells you to do is what you'll do. Whatever UN tells you to do, you'll get your ass in gear and do it. You shut your fucking pie hole. You know that's true. You know I'm true. You know I'm true. Nuclear power Albanese ditches old Labour baggage. The pro-nuclear in Australia, man. The IQ is the same, like their shoe size and the circumference of their head and their IQ are all the same size, isn't it? Sleepwalking in an economic and geopolitical minefield. There's no better alternative to coal than nuclear energy, says scumbags. Australia's despicable. Australian media and the United Kingdom medias, and Canada, of course, but the Australian and British media, holy shit, they're a-holes. They're just scum, right? These people. I've never seen nothing. There's no way to compare it. They're so evil. White House official says door is open for further talks with New Zealand. New Zealand doesn't want nothing to do with you scumbags. 51% support releasing treated nuclear water into the ocean. Well, and 100% of them didn't see these two pictures, did they? 55% opposed the release of the treated water from Fukushima. Of course, the tanks are empty. The tanks were built to manipulate you so that you didn't look for this here. Because the minute you see this is the minute you realize the tanks are empty. 57% opposed dumping water in the ocean from Fukushima plant. Ocean viewed as the best place to dump the water from Fukushima plant. A lot of schizophrenia in the nuclear industry, by the way, if you didn't notice it. Chernobyl was history's worst nuclear disaster. Like, what are you talking about? Each of these reactors, not counting the fuel pools that were at the top of the building, but just the reactors, were 100 times more uranium plutonium than Chernobyl, and is 100% lost. Like Reactor 3 cooked off at around 200,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures, for goodness sakes. Like, these are stumps. The buildings should have been, what's left, these stumps should have been razed all the way to the ground. They left them there so they can put a cover on it and manipulate the population into complacency. And they succeeded by the looks of it. And so here's Yahoo, major media, saying Chernobyl was history's worst nuclear accident, which is insane to suggest that it had anything close to being the world's worst nuclear accident. Yeah, nuclear is so evil, it's hard to comprehend. But this world needs to get its shit together and attack this industry with every fiber in your bone, because this is a battle you can't win down the road. You got to win it now. Chernobyl still holds the record as the worst nuclear accident for public health. Fukushima had 865,000 cancers in the first year. In just one study, there was 13,646 children out of 38,000 with thyroid tumors of 2 centimeters or bigger. The thyroid gland is 3 by 5 centimeters. So these are huge tumors. Forget Fukushima. Think about that statement. Forget Fukushima. Forget the multiple nuclear meltdowns. Just worry about the graphite reactor in Chernobyl. And so the person that wrote that story, Jordison, who I've called out many times over the years, He's the director of Health Physics and Radiation Protection Graduate Program and the Associate Professor of Radiation Medicine at Georgetown University. And he's telling you Fukushima is nothing. But he's in charge of your health. He's training students to go out and murder your loved ones. Your universities are nothing more now than schools of mass destruction. They're weaponized against you. He served on the National Council on Radiation Protection. And he's telling you that there's nothing got to forget Fukushima. Chernobyl's worse than multiple nuclear meltdowns. If that's not depressing, what actually is? Marie Curie, you still, like, her laboratory is still there today. You can't stay in there for more than a few minutes. And then you're getting a nasty dose. She got the Nobel Prize, right? But she couldn't pick it up because she lost both of her hands to radiation. Academic rigor and journalistic flair, the conversation. Of course, is neither. If they got married and had a baby, it would come out just like Rod Adams, yeah? And if that scumbag there and that slut over there, UK slut, got married and had a baby, never mind. It would be Stinkfoot on YouTube. Like, why is Europe's biggest nuclear waste site surrounded by farms? International community has a right to demand responsibility from Japan for dumping nuclear contaminated water. This is China, and China knows how to stop this narrative. They just got to come out and show the destroyed reactors from Fukushima and get it over with and put the end to nuclear worldwide. U.S. condemns North Korea missile. Of course, UN members, UN bombed North Korea for years. They killed millions of women and children, for goodness sakes. There's millions missing, millions of orphans. That's what UN done. And UN, 70 years later, is still torturing this country that they denied an existence to. Israel could strike Iran in 3 months, retired Israeli general says. Hey, you can't rule. Israel is stupid enough to do that, right? Only if the Americans back them up, of course. They're not going to do it on their own. They're actually cowards, right? Astronomers will shine a light on the universe's dark ages with a telescope on the moon. And how come they haven't gone back for 45 years? Anybody know that? The technology that they allegedly went to the moon with is so obsolete, it's ridiculous. The technology that they could have been on the moon for at least the last 30 years. So how come no country is occupying the moon? Because you've been led down the road of stupid. The whole system is so corrupt. You can't have a future until you deal with it. North Korea's 800,000 youth army on the brink of a nuclear war. Like, North Korea is surrounded by nuclear weapons from America and other countries. Like, what they're doing is strictly posturing because they're under siege by United Nations countries, which is 195 militaries, for 70 years. Shocking, really. That's pretty fast, isn't it? Let me check that out here. Well, it's not the fastest. Sometimes it goes faster than it looks to me. Dry storage facility for used fuel preparing for launch. Slovenia's project to build a dry storage facility for used fuel. Oh, man. These people, they lie. They don't open their mouth unless they're going to lie to you. 70 years of ANSOs, which is the Australian Atomic Energy Commission. Excellent benefits. Like there is no benefits, let alone excellent, let alone scientific, from ANSOs, from Australia's Atomic Energy Commission. These are degenerate monsters. These are morons. The world's 15 biggest container ships produce more pollution than all the cars on the planet. There's 90,000 of them out there, which is equal to 4 trillion people on the planet. Russia TV host threatens nuking any country that detains Putin. And when we covered that originally, that was a pretty funny story, actually. Hanford contractors get the best ever annual ratings, earning a $16.5 million bonus. Hanford, folks. Like, Hanford hasn't accomplished anything in at least 30 years. NRC begins partial review of new-scale small modular reactor. They had a partial application into the regulatory agency. You're talking about 1 million pieces of paper. So having a partial application in don't quantify or justify the conversation. This shouldn't even be in the news. Until the whole application in is passed and is certified, that's when you should start to have a conversation. But all they're trying to do is raise money with these half-ass attempts, right? Japan to lift evacuation orders in 2 Fukushima towns next week. The Japs government will lift evacuation orders for parts of 2 towns. For parts, Nami, which is 3%, and what's the other town? Akuma or Futabara, right? Who cares? Japan's dumping of, it's because it's nonsense. That's the only reason I'm saying that. Japan's dumping of Fukushima nuclear wastewater should be opposed. Well, what you should oppose is the fact that you're allowed to say anything. And that's a professor on top of that, who refuses to acknowledge that the reactor's actually melted down. Food from Fukushima overcoming reputational damage in Taiwan. Like Taiwan's insane. Again, what they done to Orchard Island, where the natives were, they told them they were going to build a canning factory for tuna and salmon. Instead, they built a nuclear dump. It's absurd. Russia delivers enriched uranium to France. Like, why does France need Russia when France has reprocessing facilities themselves? Because to make the enriched uranium, which they make up at Mayak, and Mayak's legacy dips all the way back into the Soviet Union, is hideous to releases. It's hideous. In order to produce the high assay weapons-grade uranium for fuel, you have to huge releases into the environment. Ionic exchange-based liquid nuclear waste treatment. You can't treat nuclear, period. It's not like a typical chemical issue, right? To put it in that category is 1,000% dishonest. Rebooting the memories of life before nuclear devastation of Hiroshima. We haven't got to worry about that no more. Japanese seafood imports hit post-Fukushima high of 170 million in 2022. Imports. In Japan's culture, those who perform great individual actions, which lead to highlighting the virtues of the individual, don't provoke admiration. In this culture, it's the sense of collective that counts, as proven by the heroes of Fukushima, the zeros of Fukushima. And so they show you these bizarre depictions that have nothing to do with the reality. There was no heroes of Fukushima. Nobody could stop it. Nobody can fix it. Nobody can change it. Right? And so this fictional Fukushima 50 There's been thousands of Fukushima 50s, and they all got sick and died eventually. The value of Japanese seafood import hits a 12-year high in 2022. Japan is such a scumbag, man. NIA urges UK to be the world's leader in nuclear-derived synthetic fuel, surrounded by farmlands. South Bruce Forum offers insight into the proposed nuclear waste storage facility. This is Canadian Nuclear Waste Management Organization. It's nonsense. They've never done nothing. They got $28 billion for the last 19 years, and they still haven't got a thing to show for it. They gave away a lot of money, caused a lot of misery for people. Well, that's which makes them a good nuclear company, I guess. Nuclear contamination testing plant at St. Louis Area Park. Nuclear contamination testing planned at St. Louis Area Park. Oh, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Is that where they had a big mount that was they finally admitted was nuclear waste buried in the ground there? I can't remember. Penn State, which got a nuclear reactor, a test reactor, to host American Nuclear Society Student Conference in 2024. And they've done studies around that. There's more males and females being born, which means everybody got irradiated from that so-called test reactor. Missing uranium found in Libya. The IAEA, they had a lot of fun though, didn't they? Demonizing Libya, blaming Libya for stealing it, causing fear-mongering that there's a dirty bomb in progress. How are we doing here? We're still motoring. We're actually doing good, 5. Blah, 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 blah. I'm just trying to guesstimate how much is left for me to get through. Unusual options volume for NuScale Power offer a compelling high-risk wager. So this was March the 21st of this year. And you can see NuScale was getting desperate to steal your money before the gig was up. Nuclear power gets a boost in the United States. Anything from Forbes is garbage, by the way. And they got rid of the regular scumbags and came up with new scumbags. Going green pits renewable against farmland. Nuclear energy can help. All nuclear power plants are surrounded by farmlands, and they're poisoning people by using that technique. Just how green is nuclear? It's the very last thing. On the green scale, nuclear is the very last one. It's not green. There's nothing green about it. You don't want core catcher delivered. You can't catch a reactor core. Or you can't catch the reactor core. It burns at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. You can't build anything to stop it. It's meant to make you complacent. That's all it's about. It's meant to catch a nuclear meltdown, see? A nuclear physicist describes 7 things you probably didn't know about radioactive fallout from a nuclear bomb. They're the least trustworthy humans imaginable as a nuclear physicist. Fallout can stay in the atmosphere for decades, not just years. Radioactive fallout is at the bottom of the ocean. It's suspended from the surface to the ocean floor. It's now destroyed our planet. Food is a common culprit of radioactive fallout exposures. Potassium iodine may help protect you for thyroid cancer. No, it doesn't. It displaces some of the radiation from your thyroid gland, but it's still going to sequester somewhere else. Only 50% of the energy released by a nuclear bomb comes from nuclear radiation. Like the taser bomba was equal to 3,800 Nagasaki's going off at the same time. So 15% of that is significant, if that's the actual real number. New council for South Bruce. Yeah, the municipality is sprucing up their offices because they got all kinds of money from the the Non-Nuclear Waste Management Organization. Savannah River Nuclear Solutions to hold recruitment fair in the North Augusta. Savannah River, don't let your children work at that disease factory, for God's sakes. Antineutrinos from nuclear reactor detected for the first time. This was 150 miles away from a Canadian reactor, and it was a mile or so under the Canadian Shield, which is solid rock. So if you go a mile down in the solid rock, 150 miles away from a nuclear power plant, you can still find the antineutrinos. So if you're within 100 miles of it on the surface, you're being bombarded, folks. Errol wants the lifting of nuclear weapons ban in the Constitution. Good for him. Get sick and die, scumbag. Northern Nuclear Conference set to be held in Columbia. Columbia is a nuclear wasteland. They got cancer clusters for leukemia of children there, and they produced studies saying it was caused by the common cold. Just so you wouldn't blame the nuclear industry. That's how evil they actually are. They got no shame whatsoever. Declassified documents uncover Manchester's master plan in the event of a 1980s nuclear war, yeah. Has locked themselves into the big bunkers where they stole all your money. And hopefully you get sick and die. Port Hope Council here's update from Legion's Canadian Nuclear Laboratories. And look at these people with the smile on their faces as if they had some redeeming qualities. They poison every person, every man, woman, and child in Port Hope. Like their foundations of their houses are built with the tailings from nuclear mining companies, for God's sakes. They're so evil that, first off, they know what they're doing. They're not naive and they're not gullible. Second U.S. citizen hits the German prison for anti-nuclear weapons action, John LaForge, who refuses to acknowledge that Fukushima's fuel pools are gone. I sent him the false promise of small modular nuclear reactors. Way to go, buddy. A modular nuclear firm launches a $900 million equity raise, but they don't even have an application into the regulatory agencies, but they're going to raise $1 billion. Right? And so they don't put any energy into geothermal. Everything goes into nuclear, which is never going to show up. And so how can you have a future? Georgia's big new nuclear reactors could be the last built in the United States. It's like 17 years trying to get these things to work. They're 4 times over budget. 6,000 companies went out of business because they didn't pay their bills. There's no end in sight to the misery that they're distributing out on top of that. European tiny modular reactor deal starts with absurdly expensive electricity. Yeah. And so you had to wait forever for the reactors to come online, if it does come online, the tiny modular reactors. And then electricity will be probably 3 times what you would pay for other electric companies that are not small modular reactors. And it's only a matter of time. Federal officials work to reassure residents near the site of Monticello nuclear plant leak. That's the Mississippi right there. Minus 30-degree temperatures. They're saying everything is in the ground. Nothing's in the ground. It's minus 30. Everything ran straight downhill into the Mississippi River. French power supply reduced maintenance and disrupted 11 French nuclear plants. And maintenance disrupted. They got almost 30 plants last year were broken down. Well, thank goodness, because they're all surrounded by farms as far as you can see. That should terrify you. Legal challenge to UK Sizewell C nuclear project approved. Legal challenge. But they lost it recently. Last week we covered that, right? They're still going to keep trying to harass them. But nuclear industry has the deepest pockets of any organization out there. The West has brought humankind to the brink of nuclear Armageddon with the decision to use depleted uranium ammo in Ukraine, says Russia's U.S. envoy. Dirty bombs. That's what a depleted uranium munition is. It's a dirty bomb. And they've used it in endless conflicts. At least large, the 155 millimeters are DU rounds. Zelensky government has been using it in his own country. Ukraine is burning through the shells at a faster rate than the Allies can produce the dirty bombs. Oliver Stone turns skeptic on critics of nuclear energy. You got Jonathan Goldstein with him, right? And his brain is rotted out from propaganda. Rediscovering the best of Fukushima local products through innovation. The best of Fukushima radioactive products from a nuclear wasteland. Get you some of that. 12 years after Fukushima nuclear disaster for the world without nuclear power. Who cares? France, scumbag France, bans TikTok and other recreational apps like Netflix, Candy Crush, Twitter from the state employees' work phones. Yeah, but they get their own personal phones, right? Rap artist Afro Man sued by officers because they spend all day watching Netflix and playing on Twitter and TikTok and stuff like that rather than working. And so they got their own phones. Rap artist Afro Man sued by the officers who raided his house and destroyed his house for a couple of grams of pot. A nuclear plant that leaked, you can't leak 400,000 gallons, that has to pour out, hemorrhage out, will be shut down after a second incident. They're going to shut the plant down to repair leaks of the water containing radioactive compound, which usually just say tritium, right? We know it's not tritium because there's no pipes or hoses that carries just tritium at any nuclear power plants, let alone at Monticello. Minnesota nuclear power plant to shut down Friday to repair a leak. 400,000 gallons is not a leak. And why did you wait 4 months? Because it was a lot more than 400,000 gallons. Nuclear power gets a boost in the United States, but that it doesn't mean nothing. Right? There's no, like the industry, what's the best way to put it? The industry is not genuine. It's not sincere. It's not actually trying to redeem itself. And it's not trying to come up with solutions. It's strictly about stealing any resources it can get its hands on. There's billions of dollars of material left over at Savannah River after the failed mixed oxide facility. Billions of dollars of construction material. And so rather than use it to upgrade the site, they gave it away. They're like literally idiots because they can't get more money with all the material sitting there. It's already paid for, so they gave it away outside, not to the plant, but to businesses and schools, so they can get more money to buy the same material. Going green pits renewable against, because they can steal, see? Going green pits renewables against farmlands. That story showed up a lot. All nuclear power plants are surrounded by farmlands, and all that food is radioactive poison food. It's not green at all. And a lot of the stories we covered multiple times. A nuclear physicist describes 7 things. What's going on here? I'll get back on track in a second. Nuclear's insane, isn't it? More nuclear waste coming to Carlsbad area repositories. New contractors take over it. Alberta grows links with small modular reactor center. Alberta didn't. It was just a single company. To suggest Alberta had bought into it is completely dishonest. And that's what they do, right? They claim the countries are buying into it and they can't wait to use it and they're absolutely in love with it and blah 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 blah. Comment period opens for experimental nuclear tech in eastern Idaho. Look at the uranium-based ammo the UK will send to Ukraine. It's dirty bombs. The cancer of war. The U.S. admits to using radioactive munitions in Syria. We're getting there, eh? We haven't got that much left to go. The A-10 Warthog only shoots dirty bombs. It shoots 1.5 tons of dirty bombs a minute. Studies suggest cancer risk from depleted uranium. DOLRAM, it used to be called DOLRAM, depleted uranium low-level radioactive material. And this next picture is very difficult to look at. But it's the children in Basra and Ukraine that have been poisoned by radioactive fallout. Very difficult picture. But that's what babies born from nuclear industry look like. Always deformed, disfigured. And that's the only picture we got of that stuff. I got tons of pictures. I'm just not going to do it to you tonight. All of those munitions to your left are dirty bombs. And this is some of the conflicts they used. Huge tonnage. The Iraq and Kuwait was actually 700 tons. And there was a Japanese physicist at a Hamburg conference in Germany that calculated the 700 tons was equal to 44,000 Hiroshima bombs of low-level radioactive fallout compared to the high-level stuff. But the low-level stuff of this stuff is still extraordinarily damaged, as you see by the babies that were born. It was 85% of the babies in Basra were deformed. And so the women refused to have babies anymore. This weapon made from 100% sustainable dirty bombs, local dirty bomb material. Daddy, what did you do in the Gulf War? Whatever it was, the Department of Defense says it was perfectly safe. And they're glowing green, right? The Gulf War is where they used a stupid amount of DOLRAM. Depleted uranium, a government cover-up. It's despicable. That's the dirty bombs that the military uses to destroy the drinking water, the food supply, and the country. This was a story from 2019 where the government was trying to get rid of, dispose of 36 million ammunitions with DOLRAM, depleted uranium low-level radioactive material. These are dirty bombs. 36 million dirty bombs because they had 36 million new dirty bombs that were even more dirty or more radioactive that they wanted to replace it with. So they threw them away. Zelensky would have took them. And McAllister's Oklahoma Army ammunition plant, a weapons manufacturing facility, all they make is dirty bombs there. They got 2,891 buildings. And they got 2,400 igloo type buildings where they store the munitions in. And these are pictures of McAllister's Oklahoma of dirty bombs, depleted uranium munitions. The A-10 Warthog only shoots dirty bombs, folks. And the bombs are pyrophoric to catch fire as they're going through there, to liberate the radiation into the environment, to cover the farmlands, the drinking water, the schools. They shot it into everything that you're not supposed to shoot it into. And then they come back and everybody calls them heroes. I don't get it. Only stupid is allowed, apparently. Radioactive water leaks at Minnesota, the Monticello nuclear plant, for the second time. That was a distraction, by the way, right? Leak, 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 leaking. That's how brainwashing is done, what you're looking there. This is not, and every story was doing that, right? This is not leaks, this is catastrophic. Chris Clark, Excel's energy president. I used to call him Dick Clark, right? Was it? Or Clark Dick, I can't remember. Putin says Russia will station tactical nuclear weapons in Belarus. So what? NATO has nuclear weapons all around her. Ramping up the nukes, Wyoming to house hundreds of new generation intercontinental nuclear missiles. So Wyoming, when they do that, when they come out and announce stuff like this, they're painting a great big X on that stuff. So they want you to nuke that rather than nuke where their real nuclear weapons are too. So Wyoming is basically being used as a human shield. New grants will fund study of sitting supply chains for small nuclear reactors in Southwest Virginia. It wasn't very much. It was a couple of $1 million or whatever. There is no supply chain. You can't have small modular reactor supply chains without having small modular reactors to know what the supply chains are going to be. Restart a damaged Swedish nuclear reactor delayed further. I'm rushing now to try to finish out. Nuclear plants, we've still got a ways to go. Nuclear plants shut down after second leak found. Second leak. I just want to poke people in the eye every time I hear the word leak. Condemns the Scottish government's nuclear stance as short-sighted and scumbaggery. How do you decontaminate objects exposed to radioactivity? Well, you don't. You can't. That's the problem, stupid. A fix to stop a leak at Xcel's nuclear plant in Minnesota did not work, prompting a shutdown. Clean energy catalyst, Savannah Riverside building electric vehicle fleet. They got so much money thrown at them, they're just, well, let's buy a whole bunch of electric vehicles. We can call ourselves green. And we can take them home and press the sweeties. Demonstrators protest Netanyahu's visit to United Kingdom. They had their chance to assassinate him and they blew it, eh? Pentagon presses Congress for a yes on the $842 billion budget. Well, Congress has never said no to the Pentagon's budget. So the Pentagon each year raises it dramatically. The forgotten nuclear bomber. Never forgotten. Just stupid, that's all. Piketon nuke site. School's closure renews radiation fears in southern Ohio. The whole area was flooded. And during, like, they have certain floods there. And where the flood is to is where they dumped all the nuclear waste. And so they hid it away, right? The Army Corps engineers hid it away for decades. They couldn't hide it away anymore. And it turns out the kids were being poisoned constantly. You know, little black kids, of course. All-electric building draws energy from 500 feet below the surface of the Earth. Called geothermal. And you can replace all nuclear, gas, oil, coal plants with geothermal. It's brilliant, right? It's stupid. So simple. So they got that hid away from the majority of the population. It is starting to take off on its own. Academic paper on cancer riddled with fabrications and retracted. Yeah, that's on purpose to lull you into complacency. Does the UK depleted uranium munitions, also known as dirty bombs, sent to Ukraine constitute collective punishment? Yeah, Dana, of course it does. Opposition leader calls on Yoon, which is South Korea's idiot-in-chief, to reject imports of product from Japan's Fukushima. And I'm not going to go into great details, but Yoon, which was a former federal prosecutor in South Korea, denied Fukushima meltdown. So you really think he's not going to let the food come in? DP leader vowed to use all possible means to hold Yoon accountable over the summit. He had a secret summit with Japan's Prime Minister. I guess it was Kishida at that time, or Suga, one or the other. Why Japan isn't tapping its incredible geothermal potential? Because they're friggin' morons. They're dummies. Ocean Thermal Energy Conversion Demonstration Project. Ocean Thermal Energy Conversion. That's actually a really that has huge possibilities. That one. Monticello plant leak. They waited 4 months before they told anybody, and then they called it a leak 1,000 times a day. Open house on Monticello plant leak. I just really disrespect the nuclear industry for being just nothing but absolute monsters' entire existence. Neighbors concerned about drinking water safety. Like, if you're within 50 miles of a nuclear plant, you should move out of there. It's hard to live anywhere without being within 50 miles of a nuclear dump or nuclear plant anyway. Because the populations are strung out in those orders. That's the Mr. Dickhead Clark there. He's a despicable creature, eh? Leak. Every time I heard the word leak, you just want to kick the shit out of a journalist. Nuclear power takes up less space than solar and winds. And they've been using that a lot for just the last couple of years. And this sack of shit, this hateful, disgusting maggot right there. These are maggots. Nuclear power takes up less space than solar or wind. Geothermal takes up less space than nuclear. Nuclear is the stupidest thing you could do. The most powerful nuclear detonation ever carried out by the United States was Castle Bravo, which is equal to 1,000 Nagasaki bombs going off at the same time. Federal appeal panel says the state can't protect the Hanford workers. If you work 8 hours in the last 70 years, just a single day, a single shift at Hanford, and you're sick today, you don't have to prove it happened at Hanford. You just got to be sick and you're entitled to a pension, health care, benefits, and maybe even a massive payout. That's how bad nuclear actually is. Western governors want nuclear testing compensation expanded, including Utah and many, many other states. There's like 7 or 8 states, was it? French nuclear tests exposed the entire Polynesian population to radiation, new study reveals. 75 years after nuclear testing in the Pacific began, the fallout still continues to wreak havoc. The story how Britain nuked Christmas Island. What Britain done to Christmas Island and what Britain done to Australia, Montebello, and Maralinga, and Australia itself. They went in Australia and actually detonated over 730 bombs of plutonium and other fission products. They're still contaminated today. And Montebello Islands, 70 years later, are still too radioactive to be habitable. Radiation hotspots. Legacy of British nuclear test lingers in idyllic islands in Western Australia. That's what I was talking about. It's not hotspots. The whole friggin' island is a big nuclear wasteland. 50 years after the worst nuclear meltdown was Santa Susana in the United States. It was equal to 463 Mile Islands worth of nuclear fallout. I'm trying to rush to finish up so everybody can last into the weekend. I don't think I'll be doing any more shows the weekend. My bum is hurting from last night and the night. I know that sounds probably strange. But when you're sitting here all day and all night, and then you sit there and then you do the show for a couple of hours. We're into 3 hours. Oh, damn it. That's crazy. This is crazy. Okay, let's be realistic here. Let me delete everything I got done so far. Let me go back one. That's a doozy to kick off on. Let me delete everything, and then let me count. I'll tell you how many I got left. So I got 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45, 50, oh my God, 60, 65, 70, 75, 80, 5, 90. You got 90 left, and a lot of them are pictures, so let's get after it. We can get through that. We made it this far, we might as well finish out March. A U.S. biologist probed the death of 70 emaciated gray whales because Fukushima broke the food chain. They starved to death because Fukushima broke the food chain. Before Dr. Strangelove, a bid to stop the sixth-form debate on nuclear warheads, the Lancaster Council fails. Yeah, no dissenting voices allowed, eh? This is what India's nuclear bomber looks like. Yeah, whoopee-doo, man. Good for you, morons. You can't use it, bird brain. What we know about Monticello nuclear plant, tritium leak. Tritium leak. Fukushima got a tritium leak. La 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 got a tritium leak. Blah 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 got a tritium leak. La 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 leak. Tritium. You don't suppose they're lying to you. They don't suppose they're scum, degenerate monsters. Support for new Fukushima Prefecture residents key to tackling depopulation. Why move people back into a nuclear wasteland? You disgusting maggots. Japanese environment economist says the Alps treat of Fukushima radioactive wastewater still contains radionuclides, urging TEPCO to stop dumping plans. Like it's never stopped hemorrhaging into the ocean. You can't contain it. Let's try to finish this up. NuScale Power, which is now humiliated as of the last few weeks, is NRC's certification of small modular reactors enough? No. They had more than enough time to build something. They never spent a nickel trying to build anything. They don't even have an actual full application into the regulatory agency. James Hub leads the passage of resolution opposing Canadian nuclear waste facility in the Great Lake Basin. And so with Bruce Power, where the Nuclear Waste Management Organization in Canada plans on putting its nuclear waste, is 7,500 lakes, freshwater lakes there, for starters. But you also got the Great Lakes basins, which is connected to the Americans, so the Americans are opposing it. And the Canadians done it on purpose because they knew that was going to happen. They probably coordinated, no less. Boosting nuclear knowledge in school plays a crucial role in building the workforce. State of our schools, you piece of shit. Sorry, folks, I lose it sometimes. Boosting nuclear knowledge in school plays on building the workforce, scumbags. Camco to receive $300 million tax refund. And so that meant that their stocks went up. Then they used that to, they didn't tell the investors that's why the stocks went up. They just told investors, you should buy because stocks are rising, right? Look at this, they're rising. But the reason they're rising is because Camco is an international company, so they don't pay state, federal, local taxes. They take the taxes and put it in an offshore account. The Canadian government challenged that and lost. Of course they did. Canada's a pro-nuclear community. And so now that artificially raised the stocks, and that was used to trick people into buying more stocks. Should Chris Leakey Clark, Xcel's energy president, resign over Monticello's nuclear plant leak scandals? That's another one of the polls we had. That's Chris Leakey Clark right there. Yeah, he should resign, Dana. Thank you. I was thinking the same thing. Depleted uranium shells, their armor-busting munitions heading to Ukraine. France 24. France 24, I've done a whole video on France 24's lies about Fukushima. It's really something. A muon accelerator. They got all this time and monetary and energy and resource tied up in nuclear. If you took 1/100th of that energy and put it towards geothermal, we could solve everybody's problem worldwide. There are the problems, see? Nothing else is allowed to exist as long as nuclear exists. So let's kill fucking nuclear. No clean slate yet. Japan lifts restrictions on more Fukushima-affected food. More restrictions. Japan lifts the restrictions. Japan did. Well, bless their hearts, eh? They wouldn't poison you. At all. Of course they would. Temporary shutdown of the Monticello nuclear plant causes fish kill. Listen, they didn't tell you if radiation was leaking, hemorrhaging out of there for 4 months. Who knows how long it actually was. And then they didn't check for radiation for 4 months and 2 weeks. And yet nobody saw through that? Leak. Philadelphia residents stock up on bottled water after chemical spill. It wasn't chemical, it was a nuclear waste. Bristol plant that spilled chemicals into the Philly water supply and other mishaps over the last decade. It was nuclear fallout, not... Water is safe to drink until midnight. Don't believe this. Never believe stuff like that if you see it. Energy company Minnesota leak was fixed. Plant and people fishing. People kept fishing because the media was out there telling them, oh no, it's all good. We checked the water. Go ahead, go fishing, stupid. Like, great, thanks, man. I don't know why you call me stupid. I got a grade 6 education, you bastard. Second leak at the U.S. nuclear plant has sprung 400,000 gallons of radioactive water. You can't call it a leak and then 400,000 gallons. But geez, look at this. Monticello plant is surrounded by farms. I never would have guessed it. That's amazing. How is that even possible? How did I miss that? How is that possible? I'm ashamed of myself, I am. What we know about the Monticello nuclear plant leak. You know jack shit. They told you jack shit. Mrs. Ori, those people are just trying to lie to you. And look how many have done it. I showed you many tonight, right? Mrs. Ori House votes to ease restrictions on nuclear power plant construction cost. How are you going to ease the restrictions on the cost? Well, they can just buy whatever they want, Dana. Just days left to comment on the experimental nuclear tech in eastern Idaho. That's the molten chlorine fast reactors. These are breeder reactors. Don't let them build that in your communities or in your country, for God's sakes. Earthquake hits Japan. Now, they say the Richter scale, but it's actually on the Japanese scale of 1 to 7. So you got to take 6.1, multiply it by 1.428, right, to convert the Japanese scale into the international scale. Was 3 Mile Island deadly radioactive fallout omitted by the heartless nuclear academics and professors? Yeah, it was. They admit now that 2 million people got radioactive doses, but they said it's equal to watching color television for an extra year. And the reality of it has got nothing to do with that. You can't conflate them together. South Korea's Yoon vows to seek public consent for Fukushima water release. Seek public consent. South Korea, who said it didn't even melt down in the first place. South Korea to keep Fukushima seafood ban despite the thaw. You shouldn't ban just the seafood, you should ban all the food. How can you just ban seafood? I mean, they didn't even start banning food till 2013. But they actually banned the food from 14 prefectures along with 54 other countries for a decade. And then when this administration went in, they just signed a piece of paper and removed all the restrictions. And then they put up restrictions a year later for seafood because they said, well, it could be contaminated. But the previous administration acknowledged it was contaminated. In fact, they sent back 6 million pounds in one go of radioactive seafood. Japan to raise retirement age as civil servants. Of course they are. I don't give a shit about you. No lifting a ban on Fukushima seafoods because of the blowback. Why fears about Fukushima water releases are overblown. And of course, there's so many people will cut your throat. And they're very esteemed people in your communities, in your universities, in your schools, in your governments, in your medias. And their job is to cut your throat. Why fears about Fukushima water release are overblown. These are disgusting people that will come out and lie about something so serious. Damage newly found in TEPCO's Fukushima Reactor Foundation. This is Reactor 1, where they're claiming that they put cameras in and it showed some damage, but everything was intact, right? Of course, there's nothing intact. Everything melted down right away by day 6. By March the 16th, rather, everything was melted down. Countdown to meltdown, how Japan-U.S. relations were tested by the Fukushima response. They wanted to cover it up, see? It's shocking how many evil people are just, when you look at the nuclear industry, how many evil people actually exist. They hate your guts. They hate your fucking guts. They hate your guts. Approach to Fukushima won't endanger the public health. Uranium now trades, blah, blah, blah. Who cares? Blah, 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 blah. Earlier notice needed Monticello nuclear power plant leak. Earlier notice needed. Why did he wait 4 months? And Chris Clark apologized. Maybe I should have told him earlier. Have a nice day. I got a big bonus this year, he said. Has spilled from the nuclear plant and that the risks were low. There is no such thing as investigative journalists no more. Ontario needs to understand nuclear is green too. Fix to stop a leak at Xcel's nuclear plant in Minnesota did not work, prompting shutdown. Community meeting held in Monticello following nuclear plant shutdown. Right? Her job is to cut your throat. Monticello residents questioned Xcel Energy's bill details at the public meeting. But there wasn't really questioning. We covered all of this as it happened. The media was sure to cut your throat, poison your children, your loved ones, your fresh water forever. Monticello residents wish they knew about the nuclear plant leak months ago. Well, they don't have to tell you nothing. I'm surprised they tell you that. Lucky they told you that, actually. Lying is the norm. They can't open their mouth and tell the truth because they get fired for doing that, right? All they can do is lie. And so when the only option is to be evil, and there's no incentive not to be evil, guess which option they're going to choose? And we're seeing this worldwide. They destroyed everybody's future now. They destroyed all the species. Destroyed everybody's ability to have a future. And they're still in positions of authority. All right. We made it. Hi, everybody. Hugs for everybody. Can't believe you folks stuck it out tonight. I know they're hard shows for everybody. Oh my God, it's 1:15 a.m. And I told you it wasn't going to be 4 hours and 20 minutes. I wasn't lying to you. We're going to end the poll. We're going to end the poll here. Where's the poll to? Bring that up. Was more than 2.2 grams of isotopes released at the Fukushima 4 nuclear reactors and 8 fuel pool meltdowns. So 4 reactors. Chernobyl was only 1. It was small compared to any of these. And Chernobyl didn't have fuel pools. And there was 8 fuel pools lost. And so I got 35 votes and 35 thumbs up in the videos, which is pretty sad when you think about the enormity of the information that I brought to the table tonight and the absurd amount of hard work that goes into. There's an entire month's worth of headlines, and like each headline could have 5, 6, 10, 15 screen captures with it to articulate the story, right? But all we done was just ran through the headlines because it's about to go down the black hole. You know, I got a tendency to revisit a lot of it. So we're going to end the poll. I know James Lewis donated 130 last night. James, thank you, my friend. And that's it for Dana tonight. We'll see everybody on Sunday. I don't think I'm doing any more shows tomorrow or the next day. Have a great night. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody on the next show. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you make it this far. Take care now.